Bosses of Reddit, what's the worst employee you've ever had to deal with? Girl comes in as a waitress. Would take food out of the window because she thought it was hers and wouldn't bother to wait for the whole order to be finished to check that it's hers. She would take it out to her table and realize it wasn't hers, chuck it, ask for new stuff because the cooks messed it up, and fuck up another waitress orders by throwing them away. Then she asked for change for $100. She received $100 in change to make change for her one table. Instead of counting it out, she hands the entire $100 back to the woman, who leaves with it all. The girl was $80 short at the end of the night. Normally it would come out of her pay, but our boss covered it in the meantime and told her to pay her back. Weeks go by, still hasn't paid our boss back. My boss gets persistent about it, and so the girl goes and talks to her mom about it. My mom says we all make mistakes and I shouldn't have to pay for my mistakes, was her response. Eventually it resulted in the girl suing our boss for $80 that our boss scammed out of her. And then she had a meltdown about working 12 hours a week, stating that it was too much for her, and why doesn't anyone understand? I'm not gonna lie, I celebrated when she quit. I worked as a supervisor for a catering company when I was in college. We had this guy who might have been the dumbest person I have ever met. I remember we had to label dishes the cooks sent out to know what went where without uncovering them. I asked him to label a breakfast and he misspelled every word, even the word eggs. The worst however is late one night we were cleaning up and I asked him to mop the kitchen before we locked up. I was in the office doing paperwork and a horrible acrid smell started filling the kitchen area. I told everyone to get out and started looking for the source. Turns out this idiot decided to mop the floor with bleach and ammonia. I kicked the bucket into the drain and went outside, coughed for 45 minutes, and ended up in the ER. The owner of the company was so desperate she refused to fire him, so I gave my 2 weeks. A few months later I hear the guy T-boned another driver with a catering truck trying to run a red light at an intersection. The resulting lawsuit ended up shutting the business down. I was a call center supervisor. I had to fire people for various reasons. Among them are the following. One of my team members was looking at hardcore porn at his workstation, leaned over to the woman sitting directly next to him, turned his monitor towards her, and asked if she thought her tigs were real. Another agent had a customer send a payment directly to him at his home faking address. One agent stole a customer's American Express black card hash and proceeded to ring up a total of $250,000 worth of charges in 2 days' time. One of my team members ran a scam for 6 months. Each day she would write down a customer's credit card number. She would then use it to buy lunch for herself and her friends each day and have her friends just give her cash. She would order the food to be delivered to the office and pay over the phone. She would have gotten away with it too. However, she turned 21 2 weeks before being redeployed. For her 21st B-day she rented the Pittsburgh Party Bus, which is a bus limo with a fully stocked bar, and they drive you around to all the different clubs with admission already paid for. There were 15 people on the bus, around $100 a person. I'm a security supervisor. I came in one morning and found the night shift guard asleep with an empty cider bottle beside him. For American Redditors, the cider in question was what you'd call hard cider. This sheet wasn't just hard, it was faking solid. If you're in the UK, it was white lightning. I walked around him, set up my computer, filled in the paperwork to get him off site, called control, waited an hour for the company to send a rep down, drank a coffee, all without this faker doing more than snoring or fidgeting. When he was cleaning out his locker, a whole bunch of empties fell out. He hadn't even had the sense to toss them. There was another guy we dealt with in the same place where a checkbook went missing from the client's desk. I saw him out during his shift one day, which in itself was a no-no, in a check cashing place in town. I went over to say hi, and he tried to clock me when he spotted me coming. Turns out he'd been using the client's checkbook to supplement his wages. I had this wacko who worked for me at a company that rhymes with blows and is a home improvement warehouse. She told everyone in the store that she had a brain tumor and was going to have emergency surgery for it on a Saturday. The following Monday she strolls in back to work. We were expecting her to be out for a rather long time. We had arranged for flowers and get well cards and had her shifts covered for the week. We asked her if she had surgery. Oh yeah. They removed the tumor. Did I mention that she had all of her hair? No? Oh, well, she had all of her hair. Not to mention she actually came into work. To describe her lying as pathological is doing the word an injustice. Update: I was unaware that you could have this done through the nose or ear canal, depending on where the tumor was. The consensus is that being back to work in 2 days is highly unlikely. Had a lady who smelled like a hamster cage, like the sawdust stuff you put at the bottom, who changed my whole perspective on humankind. She was large, breathed heavy, and complained about everything. She would show up late. When she didn't call in sick, she would show up with her lunch in hand. Her lunch consisted of multiple packages of Twinkies and a nacho platter from 7-Eleven. But she wouldn't settle for the small section normally reserved to fill with the cheese. Nope. She would remove the lid and fill the entire lid with nacho cheese. Then come in, bag of Twinkies on omelette of cheese in one hand, chips in the other. Remember, she's late, but still had time to stop for this crap. Once at work, she would smoke every 30 minutes, then come back inside and complain about how terrible she felt. Of course, you feel like shit. Nacho cheese and nicotine are not going to help. This was every day, seriously every day. Finally she stopped showing up. No warning, no calls, nothing. I fired her, as a no-show with no notice, filed under job abandonment, and guess what? She is probably still collecting unemployment. I had my own business, and the highest ranking manager kind of went through a hard time with his lady. He lived about a block away, and with us being so small in size, everyone knew everyone fairly well. So when things got rocky for him, I let him live in his office while he and his wife worked through their issues. I lived on the other side of town, so one night I was there a bit late. I decided I was too tired to drive safely and slept on my couch in my office. About halfway through the night, I wanted to make a sandwich. The manager didn't know that I was there. The offices, except mine, all had a wall of GLS, so you could see in them while walking by. There he was, getting a blowjob from perhaps the biggest black prostitute I've ever seen. Turns out he'd become a pimp, and he was breaking the new girl in. This is why small businesses fail in the first 3 years. Used to manage a coffee shop when I was younger. After the morning rush I would head into the office and work on scheduling, pay, ordering, etc. It was a small shop, so there would only be one other employee manning the counter. He/she would call me if they needed help or a break. Well, one morning my boss calls me on my cell phone, says he's been trying to get a hold of our location for the past 20 minutes. I peek my head out the door and see a few people waiting in line and my employee on the shop phone. After I get her off the phone and we help the customers, one lady, a regular, pulls me aside and says that my employee had been talking on the phone with her friend about the oral sex she gave her boyfriend the night before. Needless to say, I sent her home and put in the paperwork to have her fired. Her defense? That bitch shouldn't have been eavesdropping on my conversation. TLDR, girl fired for detailing sexcapades on the company phone, on company time. Here's a reverse story. When I was working for USAID, my boss was kind of a hard ass, as in very serious, very no bullshit kinda guy. Nobody ever wanted to cross him. He liked to yell and scream. For some reason, I happened to be the guy that he actually liked. I was the go-to guy for anything, especially PC oriented. He had me organize his PC all the time, and every time I did, I always found stuff that shouldn't be there. It was a work PC. Usually the things I found were when he wasn't around, so I just ignored them and moved on. For instance, I found a document on how to find the clitoris and how to pleasure it best. However, one day he got me to organize again, and he was looking over my shoulder the whole time. This got me nervous, because I knew we were going to eventually stumble upon something that shouldn't be there. I'm clearly stating each item in hopes that he says not open it, but one image he didn't know what it was and asked me to open it. For some reason, I knew it was going to be bad. I clicked on it and opened a picture of him in his underwear doing a pose, most awkward moment ever. I'm an electrician. When I was a second year apprentice, my foreman came to me with a brand new, wet behind the ears, first year apprentice in tow. In residential it isn't uncommon to have second year apprentices run crews of first year apprentices. He introduced us and told the kid that he would be helping me. As soon as the boss left, he looked me right in the eyes and told me, I don't have to do what you say. You're a woman. You don't belong in construction. You don't even know what you're doing. His other gems were, I'm going to marry my girlfriend. She is the perfect woman, blonde, big boobs and dumber than a bag of rocks. When I informed him that this meant he would have dumb kids, he replied, no, kids are like 70% their father, so they would take after me. I didn't have the heart to inform him that any offspring of his was doomed. I didn't have the power to terminate or discipline him in any way, so I got my revenge in other ways. He was maybe 5 feet 2 inches after a long stretching session, so I always made him do the overhead work. He once told me he didn't want to put up the lights in a garage. I told him that part of being an electrician was doing things you didn't want to do. He replied with, part of being an electrician is having an apprentice to do the things you don't want to do. You are that apprentice didn't sit well with him. Had this kid beg me for a job. After a teacher's recommendation, I hired him. He was good for a time, then he got involved with shitty people and became a shitty kid. He didn't show up for work one day saying his uncle died. When I mentioned it to his brother was like, what the fuck? So I wrote him up. The very next week I was off, the day he was supposed to work. He called one of my key holders saying he was stuck at school. I couldn't go in because I had no babysitter. One of my neighbors worked for me but had recently lost his license for dump sheet. I had to go to town, so I took him in, and when I pulled into the parking lot, shitty kid's car was parked in front of Subway 2 doors down from the store. Mind you, this was the time he was supposed to be working. I dropped off other employee, drove slowly by Subway, saw shitty kid eating a sub. I just pointed at him, and he somehow was surprised that I caught him. I called my store and talked to my outlet holder. He begged me to let him go over and fired him. Normally I say no, but this guy was screwed over by shitty kid twice, so I say sure. He walks over to Subway, buys a drink, calmly walks to shitty kid's table and says, hope that sub was worth your job, and that was the last of shitty kid. I used to be a manager at an office supply store. We had an associate who used to act really eccentric. For starters, he claimed he had duck feet and could not actually walk around the entire store for his shift unless we allowed him to do it barefoot. That was a no-go, so he demanded extra breaks to relieve his duck foot. Other times he would show up when it wasn't even his shift, but he would be wearing full-on crotched rocket motorcycle gear, including the helmet. He would then proceed to walk around the store with said gear on and attempt to hit on the female associates. When I confronted him about it, he tried to pretend at first that he wasn't an associate there. With more prodding, I got him to finally admit it was him. His response was that he was incognito. Lastly, because we were required to use radio headsets to communicate to each other, we had certain protocol about what could be said on the radio, which he promptly ignored. He had a habit of naming different areas of the store. He called the women's bathroom Beaver's Nest. He would refer to the break room as Naga Hangout Time. And also, he called the checkout hour Hocus Change City. Yeah, it was really fun firing him. Had to give evidence with a team of people to get someone fired. This is the general gist of what I attested to. Guy, a 50-year-old geologist, was mistakenly hired. He was from Wisconsin. We were in Australia. I was the first in the car with him. For the first time, I asked him if he could drive a manual, and he corrected me by saying, I can read a manual, if that's what you're asking. I said no, a manual is, can you drive stick? He said yes. Then he proceeded to rage out when he couldn't start the car, a push button start car, where you have to have your foot on the brake to start the engine. I finally felt bad and showed him how. He laughed at how simple it was and why there was no instructions. I reminded him of the car's manual, which he insisted he could read. It gets worse. After a nerve-wracking right side left side drifting event, where he kept forgetting which side of the road to be on, he dropped me off to fuel the car. I get this call telling me the car's exploded and I run. I'm not a runner. The 500 meters to the fuel depot and there he is, sitting on the hood of the car, surrounded by people trying to talk him down. But he is hysterical and won't get down, won't unlock the car, won't give up the keys. The car hasn't exploded. He's just had a panic attack because he can't start the car. Others have tried to insist they can show him how, but he insisted right back that only I could possibly understand how to start this car. For the next few days afterward, he mass spammed us with God forgives all emails. TLDR, American geologist lies about being able to start a car then has panic attack when help is offered. I have a few, but the worst was a drug addict and alcoholic that told a coworker that he wanted to make a movie with her, then proceeded to harass and berate her when she shot him down. I investigated this guy and decided terminated him in the presence of a deputy who had to escort him home. This wasn't the end of him though. He filed a damage report for personal items damaged while at work, which we'd normally cover. It was clear what he was trying to do, so I went to the location he was at when he damaged them, spoke with witnesses who actually knew him personally, and they said he broke his items himself. The reason? He was chased by a dog, went to jump a fence, got his foot hung on it and tripped. The witnesses restrained the dog. He jumps back over the fence and walks into the street, then slams his satchel on the ground, which broke his phone and sunglasses. Oh, he assessed the sunglasses at $80. They were a $10 pair of Panama Jacks from Walmart and the cell phone was a $300 track phone. Another was an employee with a mental disorder that thought his supervisor was out to get him. Having a mental disorder myself, not as extreme as his, I wasn't about to fire the guy for stirring a bit of drama. I had a few talks with him personally and basically walked him through it like a 5-year-old. He calmed down just after that and actually ended up being a great employee. Another was an employee who threw an item at a cashier of a dollar store while he had his badge on. He was a pain because he felt it wasn't right. I had 2 employees resign because I was Hitler for making them do some follow-up work. Sure, it was stupid, but that order came from DC. Another pain wasn't an employee, more like a headquarters watchdog that acted as a technical advisor. They had no concept that those little numbers on my spreadsheets represented humans and insisted I force them come in on weekends to work. I made it optional. I had one guy take a court order off of someone's door. I felt bad for firing him, but seriously? I had one keep his equipment after being fired. I left him a letter basically saying return it in 3 days or we are sending the US Marshals to come get it and him. By the way, this was a government job. He returned it so fast that he forgot to keep his personal car charger. Yeah, I had about 1300 employees, so I'm sure there's many I didn't have to deal with. I worked as a supervisor of master control at a TV station. Think DJ of a radio station, only you play the TV shows and commercials and don't get to talk. You also had to record future shows, dub commercials and lots of other logistical things. You have to be organized and on top of things, or that job will bury you. We also didn't pay much because you got a lot of candidates for getting paid to watch TV, which is what it looks like from the outside. But that meant we got some very interesting people. The worst of them never ran a commercial break exactly right in the 2 weeks he was there, and that was with me right on top of him. When I came in at the beginning of the shift on a Saturday, easiest shift available, and he had hung a yin/yang symbol directly over his chair, I knew he wouldn't be lasting much longer. Final straw was when I went home for a while that day as a test. I watched his commercial breaks and he completely missed 2 of them. So I went back to the station. I lived 2 minutes away to relieve him and finish the shift myself, and found out why he missed the breaks. He knew he was doing badly, so he took it on himself to reorganize our equipment boneyard where we stored unused but still useful stuff. It was organized before and now it was just chaos. He was genuinely surprised I told him to go home and his last check would be available on Monday. Not the boss, but I have to share this dip sheet with Reddit. I used to work at a gas station as an overpass worker. This guy worked days. I'd come in at midnight and the place would be faking filthy. Why? Because him and his girlfriend would hang out with their friends for the whole shift, ignoring or antagonizing customers. Customers would tell me how they would come in and have to leave without buying anything because his girlfriend and him were arguing and wouldn't stop to deal with customers. On multiple occasions, he was rude to customers and would steal change from them. He also liked to brag about how much shit he was stealing from the store. Oh, and then there was the time he threw a fit because he believed after working there for 3 months he deserves 2 days in a row off of his choosing. He was whiny, stupid, pig-headed, and one of those people who are always right, even when they are proven wrong. Somehow you're still wrong. He was barely literate and very vocal about how proud he was of that fact. To him education was a useless waste of time, and that school was for morons, and how he was proud to not have a high school education. He was also really racist and openly, again proudly, homophobic. Why did my boss keep him around? Ed always wondered. I mean, I quit because of the useless waste of life, as did others, but she kept him. Well, actually today I found out my shitty ex-boss was stealing money from her employees by claiming shortages in all our cash and insinuating that it was him. One of my coworkers who hadn't quit had been recording his counts for months and somehow figured it out. He had proof of it. And what did the labor board do? They warned the beach. Gotta love how useless and ineffective they are, right? I love how if I get caught stealing I get a criminal record. But if an employer is blatantly stealing from their employees, slap on the wrist. Last I heard, this semi-human slob has yet to find work 4 months after being fired. He's delivering flyers while his girlfriend supports his ass. Honestly, people like him should be sterilized. I feel terrible knowing he's going to knock somebody up with his simian sperm only to abuse and harm this kid. On the plus side, this guy's plan is to buy a Winnebago and work on farms out west in Manitoba. Him from there, and I never told him how cold it gets. I smile knowing they'll find his frozen corpse come spring. Edit. Should clarify he was stealing money as well, and tons of lotto/food/smokes, but so was the boss. She was just blaming it all on him because it was obvious what he was doing. And yes, I'm sticking by with my semi-human comment. I don't care how you NPC it is, there's no way that guy isn't part Dunno. Chimpanzee. Also, he sounds exactly like SpongeBob SquarePants. Edit. He also did not have a license and was apparently, according to him, an epileptic. He bought a car from some sketchy hobo. This car was not safetied or registered. I hope so bad the cops would catch him, and toyed with calling them myself. You have no idea how much I hate this guy. If cancer, Hitler, the heat death of the universe and him were in a room, and I had one bullet, it'd rip his faking eyes out and shoot down his throat before turning the gun on myself for having touched his unwashed dirty ass. This wasn't an employee, it was a business partner. We had started a consumer credit counseling business together. He had experience managing one as an employee. I had just gotten out of another successful business. Part of that was that I had a few large lines of credit with several electronics retailers/wholesalers. So I took $50K out to purchase all the equipment we needed to get 20 workstations, a server system and the software we needed, the phone lines and a lot of other stuff. So we were going at it, and things were going really well. I was away for a long weekend. I check my phone and have a bunch of messages on it. It's before lunch, so I figure I'll head in, find out what the problem is. I walk onto the floor and the doors are wide open. I walk in and there is nothing. Absolutely nothing. All that was left were the desks and cubes and the Cat5 wire I had installed. All the phone equipment, the computers, the chairs, even the floor mats for the chairs. Hell, my desk was gone. The security cams for the building showed him a few skeezy friends of his loading everything into a rider truck. I never heard from him again. It set me back for a long time, but it worked out. That's the worst employee I have ever had. I had a guy who was hired by my boss, the former manager of the bookstore I ran. This cashier was a skinhead, didn't bathe, and played ska music behind the counter while moshing despite numerous complaints. I fired the guy twice, and he got rehired because I was supposed to give my boss' former high school chum another chance. His most irritating behavior was asking the most uncomfortable questions to customers, notably white bread soccer moms. The one I always remember was, you ever take a dump and look back in the toilet to see what your fesses look like? Ah, I bet you do. Eventually he got fired because he caught the married and elderly company owner in a porno theater with a teenager. He came to work and said, "Guess who I met at the local porno palace? Herbert Haft. He was with this young girl." I said, "Hey, I work at one of your stores." Although he was making it up until corporate called me and demanded I shut him up. They spoke to him over the phone and threatened him. He thought it was hilarious. So he told every customer he could that day. I fired him, and this time, he never got rehired. Those in the DC area that remember the Haft Empire would not be surprised. I used to work as assistant manager at a seafood department in a grocery store. Before I got the job, my boss hired this guy to fill the position. He had the barest understanding of how a job worked. He'd show up late and make up excuses. He'd come in, complain he wasn't feeling well, and force me to come in on my day off to work the rest of the shift, and then tell someone else in the store, usually a young woman, that he was hungover and was just going home to sleep it off. I once came back from break and found him standing there in full view of customers, eating from a container of Cool Whip with his fingers. His fingers. Just spooning that oil-based sheet into his stupid maw, oblivious of what he looked like. The last straw was when my boss went on vacation, leaving him in charge. Needless to say, the department went to hell. Orders weren't done, bunkers that were supposed to be filled weren't, forcing the store manager to come in and start filling gaps and spending time fixing problems. I warned him time and time again that leaving early was a bad idea and that he was gonna lose his job. He ignored me, and sure enough my boss came back, had a meeting with the store manager, and then they transferred the idiot over to the front cash, leaving me with a promotion and a pay rise. This guy was eventually fired for napping at the cash register. I wasn't a manager, but I felt I had to take things into my own hands on this guy. I worked at a McDonald's, and one of our fricks named Trevor would drink on his smoke breaks, but this one day shit got real. On this certain day, when he went on his smoke breaks, he drank and did what I can only assume was a metric fact ton of cocaine. He did this every hour on the hour, all shift. As you can imagine, Trevor began to act disgruntled and angry. Finally his last straw was at 11:59 p.m., 1 minute to closing time. We get an order, a large order, and in his drunken slash coked up super he messes it up. The folks in the drive-thru were pissed. He got mad, and somehow in his drunken belligerence, started accusing his co-workers for messing up the food he drunkenly made wrong. Trevor punched out the drive-thru window and cursed at the people in the drive-thru. He punched a fellow co-worker in the mouth and called him an insult I will never forget as my co-worker laid knocked out on the ground. "You nigger kike, you're the load your mother should have swallowed." Trevor then punched me in the face and dumped a gallon bucket of sweet tea on me. At this point I calmly get up, wipe off my bloody nose, and clock out and leave work, as my manager literally sat there and did nothing. When I got home I called the McDonald's district manager and reported Trevor. Little did I know at this time was Trevor's girlfriend was a manager at another local McDonald's, who found out I ratted him out. For months Trevor called my home phone and cell phone giving me death threats over him getting fired from his McDonald's job where he got paid $8 an hour if he was lucky. Trevor came to my McDonald's many times. After he found out I ratted him out, he would come up to the glass windows in the front of the building and stare at me for minutes at a time, miming cutting my throat or shooting me. Granted, I understand. Snitches are supposed to get stitches. As soon as I could I got my CCW permit and Trevor doesn't scare me anymore. Last I heard of Trevor was he got busted at the Canadian border smuggling. You guessed it. Cocaine. TLDR. Cocaine is a hell of a drug. I worked with a veterinarian who, as a grown woman, was the most immature and spoiled brat piece of shit I've ever had the displeasure of meeting. In the year and a half I worked for the clinic, she called in sick probably 12 times, and she would call the day if, leave a message on the voicemail with something like, "Yeah, guys, I'm not coming in. Thanks, bye." No excuse, no nothing. Then, the other vet scheduled that day would have to take on all her appointments along with all this, plus perform the surgeries of the day. One time she had a vacation coming up on the weekend, and spent the entire week talking about how she wished she had Friday off, so that she could leave a day early. Lo and behold, she called in sick on Friday, and she was narcissistic enough to believe we wouldn't catch on to her little scheme. At that point, just faking tell us you're calling in, so you can leave early on your vacation, know that you're sick, and feel like death. And definitely don't post pictures all weekend of your awesome vacation, including of yourself water skiing and doing other fun stuff that a sick person wouldn't do, and then show up on Monday like nothing happened. When she would do this, it would fuck up the entire day, make us have to work twice as hard, and our clients and their pets got poorer service because of it. The reason she got away with it was because the practice owner was a total pushover and the sweetest guy in history. She'd just bat her eyelashes at him and apologize and he'd forget it ever happened. Ugh. I hated that beach. I worked for a freight company for a while, one where all your stuff, from computer desks and wine to car parts and condoms, are sorted into their respective destinations. Anyway, we had this guy, age 28-ish, come in one day in the annual temp influx. He was a broken tool at best. I'm not a poor workman. This tool was broken. He'd constantly misplace freight in the wrong destination. Normal for a new guy, but after 3 months you'd think it'd improve. He would wrap the shed up half an hour before a truck or plane would come in, assuming the night had ended, but we were all just waiting for more freight. One night he came into the break room, in front of truckers, pilots and every one of his colleagues, and puts a unopened can of spaghetti in the microwave and turns it on. We all sat there staring as he started watching T.V, completely oblivious to what he had just done. The microwave quickly started to sheet itself, before anyone could do anything. He then took the can out, and declared the microwave was buggered. Brilliant. Another time he dropped a case of wine off a railing, assuming it would survive a 3-meter fall. His excuse was that a case of wine is far stronger than a single wine bottle as the strength of each bottle in the case is magnified. This guy was also one of the tallest people I've ever seen, but he had the smallest little hands, but they were incredibly hairy, like some heavily pubed small penises at the end of his arms. I guess he wasn't so bad. He somehow went up the ranks as he never spoke much, but the night he resigned he left a poem for everyone working there. It said, like the dust and the sound, the wind and the rain, I may see you once again. The nights I have spent, undertaking the gauntlet, will remain with me forever, for what greatness they meant, and just like the freight from the trucks, and cans from the planes, I must leave you now, like dust in the wind, like dust, in, the wind. This man is now a commercial pilot for a major airline. I was the office coordinator for a large staffing agency in 2004 to 2006. My office was unique in that it was situated on a client's site in a modular building. Our office only staffed for this one client, but we had 225 to 250 employees at our client's site. Every spring, the client would hire approximately 10 to 20 people from our pool of people. This was a great opportunity for people that had little to no previous experience or a less than stellar work history to get a foot in the door and an opportunity to advance to a job with great pay, benefits, etc. Of course, you also got some of the scummiest people walking through your door looking for work. Our biggest disqualifying factors were felonious/sexual background checks, testing positive for a controlled substance, and recent violent crimes. We also tended to stay away from people that had worked heavy manufacturing doing repetitive stressful work for a long period of time, lest our workers' comp would take a hit. I was second in command of our branch office and reported directly to the branch manager, Mandy. Mandy was a very cantankerous woman of about 40 to 45 years old. The best way to describe Mandy was she kick-started her vibrator and rolled her own tampons. Mandy absolutely loved me and treated me like I was her golden child. I was in charge when Mandy was absent and all the shift leads would call me when they had a problem. One story come to mind from my treasure trove of tales. We had an employee I will call Fred. Fred lived in a weekly rate hotel that was a dump right down the street from his favorite bar, which I will call Minnie's. Fred worked on one of the day shift that ran 6 AM to 6 PM, and from the stories I heard came from a decent family in an adjoining town that was about 20 miles south. Fred had started off as a decent employee, but his attendance started slipping as he was calling in sick. Fred was of the notion that he was going to work just enough to be able to earn himself enough money to just be able to drink and pay weekly rent and no more. Fred had been cancelled repeatedly by myself and finally the branch manager on his attendance. He was on his last warning and was informed that any more attendance violations in the next 30 days would be met with termination. 3 days later, Fred comes into my office hysterical that his mother in the adjoining town had a stroke and was dying in the hospital. He really needed to be with her. I grant him a 1-day approved absence as long as he is going to be with his mother at the hospital. He thanks me profusely and I call him a cab. When Mandy comes into the office, I inform her of the situation. She is going to wait about an hour and then go down to Minnie's to see if he is there. Half an hour after I spoke with Mandy, the office receives a call. It is from Fred's sister. Her and their mother had been doing some shopping downtown and her mother stepped out in front of a car and gotten hit. Her mother is in bad shape. They are airlifting her to a trauma hospital. I take her name and number and will have Fred give her a call. I call down to Minnie's and ask the bartender if Fred is there. It is an emergency. They put Fred on the phone. I relay the information from the sister without mentioning anything about his absence. Fred then blows up on me via the phone about how dare I call him at Minnie's. He informs me that he doesn't care if his mother who is a beach is dead. How dare I ruin the sanctity of Minnie's by calling him. I then inform that he is fired. Don't bother coming to work tomorrow. I then inform the branch manager of this and she laughs and says takes all kinds and she is glad she doesn't have to terminate him now. I call and have the customer deactivate his access card and I enter his termination notes in the employee database. 20 minutes later a cab pulls up and Fred jumps out and comes running into our office and starts screaming at me from the entrance to the building while walking towards my office. Mandy hears the commotion and grabs him and pulls him into her office and plops him down in a chair. The conversation ends with him saying, "Fuck you, Beach. I don't work for you. I work for the." He then storms out of the office. We look out and see him try to use his access card in the gate to gain entry to the factory. When it doesn't work, he begins kicking the gate. At that point, I call 911 and report an aggressive drunk ex-employee attempting to break into a secure facility. Fred walks around to the front office of the client and starts banging and kicking on their locked front glass door demanding to be let in. I call their receptionist and inform her that police are on the way. He ends up kicking their glass window and spiderwebbing it before being tasered by the police. Our client ended up having him barred from the property and pressed charges on him for his tirade. 3 days later I get a call from Fred asking me as sweet as pie if he can have another chance at his job. I had to inform him that even if I was willing, which I was not, he had acted in such a way that the client had him barred from their property. They were so terrified of him, my hands were tied. He thanked me for my time and hung up. 2 years later, Fred was killed in a bar fight after being hit in the head with a bar stool at Minnie's. I used to work in a kitchen, doing the dinner rush 5 days a week, weekends and after school. I was 16. I worked with this one girl who was older than me, but started way after me, who was allegedly on anti-anxiety pills. After a slew of events, all the night supervisors were away on medical, and I became the night kitchen leader, because I worked my ass off, and I knew the kitchen better than anyone. She didn't like this, and every day was a living hell with her. She would work the sortie side and constantly be behind orders during a rush. And not because she couldn't do them, but because she'd be losing her sheet at the new guy, who was actually doing really well. When I finally stepped in, she would claim it was cause she wasn't on her meds. Okay, fine. Same thing would happen, or she would snap at me, or try to take over my job, when I would run to the fridge to grab more Vegas, throw out orders, or blame every single mistake on me. She eventually tried to boss around other staff and they flat out ignored her. Every time I would ask her, it was cause she was on her meds, or off her meds again. I found a new job, and between the two I worked 14 days in a row and finally had a day off, before I worked another 10. I told the kitchen staff that this was my one day off, and how pumped I was. And around an hour into the dinner shifts I get a phone call from the manager. She was losing her sheet and I needed to come in to take control. I say no. I get called by my kitchen staff friend and the owner, before I finally say yes. I drive there, walk in, and she's throwing tongs, slamming pans, screaming, grunting, crying, yelling, just being a danger. So I walk in, look at the bills, and notice there are only 3 bills. Nothing major at all. I take her tongs, whip around and go get out. Go home. I'm done with this attitude of yours. You could have hurt yourself or John, the way you are handling yourself, and it is not acceptable. So go home. Calm down. You are in tomorrow and I expect this to change. Got it? And did the bills. My last few days with her were a breeze. Apparently she was still a handful, but got fired for her attitude. Not a boss, but I'm on a team with this person and my team leader's hands are tied by her managers to do anything about it. So I understand the need for little white lies, mental health days, what have you. Sometimes you just need a break. I get that. Hell, I could use one now. But one of my coworkers has been out now for a few days shy of a month. The given reason? Her mother died after having a stroke. Okay, I can see how you might need a month to get on with life after something that devastating. Here's the thing though, and I would honestly like some feedback over whether I and my team leader are being overly suspicious. There is no obituary. When the company wanted to send flowers, this coworker said, just to have them sent to the house. When anyone tried obliquely to find out what hospital her mother was in back before she died, coworker just found ways to weasel around the question or downright did not answer. None of her friends on Facebook even reference her mom dying, or even the normal "our thoughts are with you" type words of comfort. She said that she doesn't have enough money to carry out funeral preparations, but when my team lead, who used to work for the biggest funeral home in the area here, suggested that there are either A, payment plans, or B, pro bono work written off as tax credit, coworker states that she doesn't like that funeral home. Since we do not really have an hour department per SE, one of our admin assistants has been given the task of trying to obtain some proof that this is all true, so that coworker can at least have bereavement pay, but until she brings in proof, coworker is not getting at least a month's worth of checks. Not to mention, this is a sort of job that you can work from home, though it's encouraged that you come to the office. Hell, my team lead's dad has 6 months to a year to live due to cancer, and she still comes in. If she's not in office, she's working from home or the cancer center, and she's going blind due to a disease called pseudotumor cerebri. On top of all this, it happens over 2 weeks of our busiest time when insurance switches over from one year to the next, and we have to be fixing and testing and making sure everything works when our software goes live. This coworker has always been the drama llama. If you have a story about something, she's got one better. If you're having trouble in your relationship, she's got even worse. She is a supreme hypochondriac who has, by her own admission, dragooned her physician into a diagnosis of lupus. Oh yes, she also supposedly has stage 3 cancer of some downstairs parts that change every time we hear about it. But she's not taking any meds or treatment for it, and instead insists that coconut oil and juicing is the only treatment she needs. The coconut oil is a running joke by now with us. And the icing on the cake is that we can't get rid of her because we are contractual obligated by the company we are vendors for to have X amount of employees. TLDR, habitual liar coworker out for a month for allegedly dead mom, hasn't produced proof, still couldn't fire her anyway due to contractual obligations. Receptionist in a state office, that is, bulletproof job security. I'll leave 2 stories with you, but she was generally just grossly insubordinate. First, she used to sit there all day scratching lotto tickets. She did this for years, and when she was finally fired, read below about that, we noticed that she would scratch a ticket and then rub off the silver powder on her chair. The whole right side, if her chair was silver, used to be orange. Second story, she had been there a while and accumulated time at about a day off per 2 weeks. She would then call in every Friday or Tuesday around a 3-day weekend. She wouldn't ask for this time off in advance, she would just call in. We printed out a giant calendar with holidays on it, and like clockwork she had taken off the day before, or the day after every Friday/Monday holiday for 3 years. Finally, we warned her that it was necessary to come in on one such holiday and she called in sick. Thought her job security would work out. It didn't. We fired her, but the municipality later found out and, fearing a lawsuit, tried to make us take her back. We refused, so they put her somewhere else. She lasted there a year and was finally fired. No idea why, but I could guess. Restaurant floor manager here. There was this waitress named Crystal. Just a terrible employee. When we were between general managers, the interim manager hired her. She would come into work 30 minutes daily, complain because she always got the worst section. Not because she was late, because she was a crappy server too, and not do her side work. She would come in for the 4 PM shift and ask to go home early every night, but complain because I didn't schedule her enough, and she never made any money. One night it was a really busy night, and she went against my word and taught one of the busboys how to wait tables. And by taught, I mean she gave him her apron, her book, and told him the specials, and walked to the table with him. She did explain he was a trainee, but didn't help him when taking the order, asking meat temps, cheese, dressing, etc. The barback called out, so I was helping them out for a while, but I finally got a second to check on everything, assuming the head server would take care of some responsibilities of mine in a situation like that, because she's supposed to, but nope, she was slammed herself. That was a mess to clean up, with angry customers yelling at me left and right. So when I finally got around to confronting her, she just made up some excuse that the head server told her to, and yada yada yada. Whatever, I told the hostess to not seat her anymore, and I sent her home. After she checked out, she didn't even share any tips with the busboy. My boss wouldn't let me fire her, because we're in the middle of the season, we can't afford to lose a body. So the following week she hooked up with the kitchen manager, who got fired a few days later for embellishing his hours. The day after he got fired, I checked her out and walked downstairs with her. She flipped us all off and walked out. That was a great night. Obligatory. This will probably get buried. Let me tell you the tale of Muhammad, a man so incompetent he got fired from a store that no one in 3 years has gotten fired from. Muhammad was a new hire to a Staples supply store. We are a pretty easygoing bunch, don't piss anyone off, and work. That's all they've ever asked. There's times I speak openly of finding a job that'd be more suitable to my work schedule. Times I've not really been into working too hard, and times I show up a few hours late, mistakenly, because of daylight savings, or forgetfulness. I've never been written up. Now, part of this might be because I see myself as a pretty good employee. My numbers are okay when it comes to selling, but I do my job. I run the register like a badass, and I've never had a single complaint against me. Not one. Muhammad, the fact this guy, as the name implies, not his real name, he's Arabic. Born and raised Muslim, and it's apparent from the day he walks in. I, in no way, shape, or form, have a problem with anyone from any religion, but it's as if Muhammad took all the worst parts of his cultural upbringing and released them upon our tiny store. He would not listen to any female manager. In fact, he often talked down or back to our main manager, who happens to be female. It escalated when he refused to help female customers, or at least even try. One woman left the store almost in tears because of how rude he was to her. Still, the Azam who hired her refused to even write him up. He was nothing but nice/agreeable to any male in the store. Even if he was a tad bit rude, none of us saw too much of a problem until we started listening to the female employees. What was more, Muhammad would constantly find ways to sit down. The job has a few rules, but being able to stand for 10 to 12 hours is a requirement. It's tough, and it can cause damage, but it's better than being behind a fryer, right? And almost anyone can stand for the time, if they really try. Except him. Muhammad brings a faking chair behind the register. Really? Really? It's not even like he was trying at this point. The list went on and on. He'd find ways of cutting out earlier than he was scheduled to leave, or he'd find ways to shirk off his shift. It was arguably the worst work ethic I've ever seen. Even when I'd ask my more religious friends if this was just a cultural thing, they even thought all his mannerisms were a bit extreme. Eventually we canned him, and the store's been pretty happy since. As the son of a business owner who does not have Reddit and can't share his story that almost made his business go under, I shall. Note, I'm the son, so I'm telling the stories I heard, assuming there are more that I don't know. My father hired a woman who was an acquaintance of his, that he'd known for a while, and had good faith in her, that she was a hard worker, blah blah blah. Well, after 10 years of working there, causing small problems along the way, but nothing that would jeopardize her job, one day, she up and decides to take a much needed vacation from the shop, and doesn't show up for a while, and doesn't say why, doesn't say when she'll be back. So naturally, work needs to get done, with no one there to do it. My dad hires a temp to take her place, until she shows up, or until he hears from her. However long after this temp has been working there, 5 or 6 days, the righteous vacation taker shows, and up and is furious, when she sees this person doing her job. Goes to my dad and blows up about this temp taking her place. My pop don't like this, so he fires her on the spot. She leaves in a fit of what some might recognize as roid rage, knocking shit over and breaking things. Over, right, wrong. A week later my dad finds out that the company is being sued because my uncle, co-owner, has been accused of sexual harassment upon this employee. She drags this on for 2.5 years, causing my father's company tens of thousands of dollars in court fees and lawyer fees, almost sinking the company into bankruptcy. Needless to say, she won, settled outside of court for $170,000, but the company still lives. What a beach though. Had a guy come in for an interview at my job, aircraft hangar, and when I asked him his name, he answers with Jazz, seriously drawn out. I look at his application and it's say William on it. So I say, alright William, here's how. He blurts out it's Jazz. So, I just don't use his name. We put him to work fixing brake cylinders, and about 5 minutes later I smell cigarette smoke. I turn around and I hear smoking directly in front of a sign that says no smoking. So I tell him to put it out. He drops it on the hangar floor and puts it out with his shoe. I ask him why he did that, and he says you said to put it out. About a half hour later, the owner of the company calls me into her office and asks who is smoking in the hangar. I explain about the earlier situation, and then I smell it. I look in our tool room, and he is standing in there smoking. I tell him to put it out outside and take lunch. He drops the cigarette on the shop floor, puts it out, and then walks to the office and clocks out. My boss stops him to tell him not to smoke in the hangar. As he is walking out, he lights up again. I ended up just following him outside and firing him right there. I was the manager of a handful of people who were contracted to clean a building. Basically we go in while it's still dark, clean everything, and usually done when the first employees of the company start showing up at 8:30 am. We cleaned a 2-story building that is owned by a popular pharmacy chain in the UK that rhymes with Coots. I worked there a few months under the current manager, taking her cleaning duty shifts with her and learning the ropes until one day, earlier than we all expected, she just stopped coming in the morning. I took charge, worked out rosters for all the other employees, and everything went smoothly. In fact, when my area was done and cleaned, I would go to other areas and help out the other employees if they were getting behind, make sure no areas were getting missed, and even would do extra like scrubbing the stairs for scuff marks. Then the business owner decided to hire a new employee, not a new manager, just a new girl that was related to her. New girl decided she liked my job better and went over my head to become the new manager because she asked her relative, the business owner, and because she was related she let her do whatever she wanted. As the new manager, she got the second floor to clean, that just sweeping and emptying bins. She failed to understand why, as the new manager, that she still had to clean an area, and instead, halfway through cleaning my area, she would come and order me to clean her area for her because she was busy buffing the floor. Yes, using the machine to buff the floor, the same floor she would buff every day for a week. The same 10 square meters, simply because you just had to hold onto the machine and not actually do anything. I eventually got so stressed having to clean my area, rushed to get most of it done because I knew every morning around the same time she would order me to clean the entire second for her while she buffed that same faking piece of floor while checking her phone and sheet. Mind you, I was still worked out the other employees' rosters and areas at the same time. I was doing 3 jobs. I eventually came in one morning, did my area quickly, and took off my uniform, and changed back to my normal clothes. When she came in to get me to do her floor, I just dropped my uniform on the ground in front of her, and told her to shove the job up her ass, and maybe clean her own damn area for a change, and walked out. Not exactly qualifying as worst compared to many comments in this thread, but when our assistant managed a clothing store in San Jose a decade back, we hired on a bro and C's both around 16 for audit month. The managers take apart the whole store and take inventory for regional managers. Not even a day in, things began missing. New inventory was sometimes short by 1 to 2 items when they worked, and I couldn't explain it. I told my boss, but he thought I had just not counted the things in the back correctly, which during audit month can happen quite frequently. A couple of weeks in, during closing, I had already done register count, but 4 people walked in, so I reopened it for them and let the boy do the register. After the transaction, the 2 kids left, and I recounted the register to find $1,500 missing. Called boss and he called police and the kids' parents. They blamed it on me. Fortunately, my manager saw through the lie. What pisses me off is a boy took it while I was watching the customers right in front of me. I had a delivery driver that had been working for us for about 3 weeks offer heroin to a 17-year-old female employee. She was not the type of girl that would be likely to say yes to an offer like that. I had a pizza cook who couldn't read pizzas would come out with the right number of toppings on them, but they'd be completely random. Then he got hired at a different pizza place I was working at a few years later. Against my advice, he'd at least learn to read since I'd last seen him, and made alright pizzas for a few weeks, but screwed us when he went outside for a smoke break and never came back, and the bastard took one of our good aprons. I've worked with a child molester, though thankfully nothing ever happened at the job. I only found out when he applied at another place I was working, and I saw he'd just been released from prison. He was a weird faker, managed to cut himself every single day he worked, then left blood, or iodine, as he always claimed, all over the sink. We'd have to tell him to go back into the bathroom and clean it every goddamn day. I've worked with a ton of racists, a few proven thieves, lots of suspected thieves, a few people with mental issues that made me worried they were going to harm themselves or someone else, and plenty of other scumbags that made my life more difficult. There's obviously been good people too, but the people who just do their job aren't as memorable as the sheetheads. I worked at a fancy membership-based men's salon on Wall Street. It's the kind of place where the CEO of Bank of America goes to get his hair cut, or you have guys coming in for manicures because they are going to ring the closing bell at the stock exchange. Swanky. Absolutely terrible management. Possibly the worst I've ever encountered. The owner never wanted to leave her mansion on Shelter Island, which is about 3 hours from Manhattan, and so she left the salon to be looked after by a really cheesy ghetto dude who used to sell used cars. For real. He was sort of around my age, was training me on how to sell the memberships, and we smoked weed together after closing up sometimes, so I thought he was alright. Until tips started going missing. I got accused of stealing them and was dumbfounded. Then he was teaching me to close out the register and would take around $200 out, tell me not to say anything because H was going to put it back the next day. Sometimes he would, other times he'd make up a blatant lie to my manager, who was now starting to suspect me. I come into work one day after he had closed the previous night, and there is a giant nugget of weed sitting on the desk before we open. If I wasn't at work I'd be overjoyed, but this could have gotten me in some trouble. I go downstairs to talk to him, and he's crushing up OxyContin and snorting it before 9 AM. Obviously at this point I realize he's totally faked. I go to close the register and $300 are missing. I think I'm about to get into a whole investigation thing because I feel like he is making everyone suspicious about me, but luckily he got arrested for drugs, and it was discovered that he was a gambling addict and had to go to rehab for that as well. Plot twist, he was the owner's nephew, and he had a 4-year-old son. But he did leave me a free mug of weed by accident. I ran to stores. I had this young kid in his late teens who worked for me who objected being asked to do anything to actually earn his paycheck. Clearly thought he was smarter than I was and that he should be managing the place. Never mind that I had tons of experience and was twice his age. Major case of entitlement, that kid. I tried to work with him, but he was a bit mental, and I didn't really realize that at first. I just thought he was a bit of a whiner, maybe a bit of a spoiled kid. Needed some coaching and a little time to grow up. I wanted him to succeed, but he made it almost impossible to like him, let alone help him. Even the owners, who hated to fire anyone, eventually they wanted him gone, and after a while I was asked to fire him. I tried to do it as firmly and gently as possible, but he just could not take it. He threatened to sue, called me things I won't repeat, suggested I was incompetent at all. Finally he actually started calling the store at night after we closed, either eerily hanging up or saying nasty things to me because he knew I'd be there doing paperwork. I told him I knew it was him and to knock it off, but according to the owners it took a threat of police action before he stopped. I thought it was over at that point, but it wasn't. He finally called one last time a few months later to supposedly apologize, but also, incredibly, to ask for his job back. I was just stunned at that point by how scary the situation was getting and how weird he was acting. That's when I realized this kid was likely very ill mentally and might actually hurt me or someone else. Between that and the actual job situation not being too great, I had enough. I gave my notice, found a better job. I'll let the owners handle that situation. But I have to wonder sometimes, if I had stayed, if this kid might not have done something really violent. He definitely had issues, as they say. Oh god, where to begin? Okay, this was my direct report, but he was bad. He himself was his own supervisor, but spent huge chunks of his shift in an entirely other zone with a female employee, who was decidedly not his wife. Frequently things would go wrong, and he was simply unreachable. In his 1 year on the job he broke 2 aircraft, 5 pieces of ground equipment, and suffered 2 injuries. His zone, he was one of 24 supervisors, accounted for 20% of our accident rate for the year he was employed. He frequently would call in to say he was going to be late, but then would never show up at all. He simply didn't show up, not even called out. He just didn't show up because he had been arrested for extreme DUI several hours before his shift began. At one point he failed an internal audit, not just did poorly but failed, something I had never seen happen before, and I had worked in some pretty crappy operations. When I went to speak with him on this topic he proceeded to scream profanities at me, throw his equipment across the room, and told me not to tell him how to run his damned zone. Of course, he was buddies with one of the directors, so pretty much untouchable. Yeah, that guy really made my job fun. I was kitchen leader, but not kitchen manager, meaning I had no real power. My boss hired this kid named Tyler who's right out of Idiocracy. Simple-minded to a you'd laugh, if it weren't sad point, quick to anger, if it got a little busy, if food was sent back, if he couldn't find a spatula, conversation skills of Nell. Shortly after being hired he began serving as our night janitor, which was when he began stealing clear liquor and replacing it with water, since the one we had quit. It was a crap place to work, and your check would bounce sometimes. A good company to be a part of, but at a franchise with bad owners, turnover was fierce and policy was ignored. So, every so often we are finding white residue and straws in the bathroom. Once he left his powdered bank card right on the edge of the sink. By the time his shenanigans were reaching the sloppy point, I was already 3 weeks into my 2 weeks notice. I came in for a morning shift to find him in a ridiculous mess, 25-minute bill times with only 4 small bills in the kitchen. The whole time I was catching us up and cleaning his mess I could hear him muttering under his breath obscenities directed at me. Then he dropped a plate and freaked out. I told him, dude, calm down. It's faking eggs, and he went off about how everything was going fine till I showed up. So I took off my apron, walked up to the manager, and said I'm out. http yahoo.be/. Before I started my own firm my last position was as the network director at a 25-side company that was in the financial sector. I took the position when the firm moved to my city and had to hire about 80% of the department as few of the current staff were willing to move. I put one person on staff as attempt to manage the telephone systems and network throughout the country. He was fine at first, so after 4 months I hired him into the position full time. The job description was very clear in that it was an individual contributor position, not a supervisory position. I should have known I was faked when he was 5 hours late to work the first day he was a full-time employee. Then he took out an ad to hire an assistant, totally unauthorized, and I had to reiterate that he was not a supervisor and had no hire/fire authority. He then proceeded to pull every scam in the book to avoid coming in and actually working. I went through a very structured process of disciplining him, then terminating him, documented everything soup to nuts including having him sign off that he understood he was not doing his job well, etc. Then I fired him. Next day he comes in with an attorney who had no business card and who looked like his brother. He announces that he's going to sue for racial discrimination. Ex-employee is black. I'm not. I laugh, had them escorted out. I leave work that evening. He and his attorney are waiting for me at my car. They threaten me, tell me I'll be dead if I don't hire him back. I get in my car, grab the 600,000 volt stun stick I keep, pop the ex-employee one in the chest, and he goes down like a lump. Attorney starts yelling at me like he's the drug dealer from hell, punches my car window, but misses and hits the center post, breaking multiple bones. I get in the car, drive down a level, and call 911. The cops arrive before I hang up, arrest them, and I spend the evening doing my cop interviews and writing out a statement and shaking like a leaf because those assholes had scared me half to death. They were charged. I wasn't. They pled to some low-end misdemeanor. My company got a restraining order against them. I never heard from them again. Texas is a really good state to defend yourself in, by the way. The cop who took my stun stick as evidence loaned me a spare stun gun. We became good friends. I still have drinks with him a couple of times a year. TLDR, hired a guy who immediately changed behavior, fired him. He threatened to sue with a fake lawyer, then threatened to kill me. I stun gunned one of them. Cops arrested them. They were both convicted, and I made friends with a cop. I'm not a boss, just a regular employee. I work in a chain sit-down restaurant. There's one server named Ashley, not her real name, who bitches and moans about everything to the point it's extremely excessive. It's one thing to have a bad day, but she literally bitches 24 faking 7 while she's there. Never stops. Anyway, Ashley is a pill popper and sometimes comes to work completely off her rocker. She also talks a mile a minute, so she's really annoying. Anytime anything is stolen or missing, she's always working. Always. One girl's expensive jacket went missing. A girl who wears a size 0. The only other girl in the restaurant the same size as Ashley, and she was working the same shift. No proof, though. Anyway, this Ashley chick bitches and moans when she gets tables, when she doesn't get tables, when she's sat, when she's not sat, any section she's in, any type of customer she has to deal with, old people, only women, only men, black people, foreign people, kids, you name it. She'll bitch about being there and about needing money, but the minute the manager says he's cutting people from the floor, she's the first one to volunteer to be cut. The other night, in the middle of our faking Friday night rush, she answered her cell phone right in front of our manager. He told her to get off and help. She sassed him and gave him lip, saying it was her boyfriend and he needed her awesome bullshit. All of us are hoping she gets fired. We are amazed she's been around as long as she has. Oh, another thing, the restaurant has recently enacted a new rule where you can only smoke, outside of course, at designated times. I'm not a smoker, so it doesn't affect me, but 99% of the people who work there smoke. Pretty much everyone's been okay with this, but Ashley hangs out at the back door, which the manager has to unlock, and waits around like a little puppy. Oh, while bitching. She'll do it for 30 minutes before the scheduled smoke time. She acts like she's the only one dying for a cigarette. A week ago, she got caught going outside to go smoke. The new rules is 3 write-ups and you're fired. The manager gave her a write-up. She made up some bullshit story about running out to her car to take an insulin shot and she didn't smoke. I was standing right next to her as she told this lie and I could smell the faking smoke reeking off of her. She lies all the goddamn time and everything that comes out of her mouth is faking negative. Which is funny because today, I told her that another of our co-workers experienced her third bad thing this week. Our coworker is really sweet, but she seems to have bad things happen to her all the time. Car breaking down, car getting towed, sewage backup in her apartment, her dog died, etc. Point all within a 2-week period. Anyway, I was saying how sad it was that she keeps getting hit hard with bad things. Ashley said, and I quote, "Well, you know, it's just because she has such a negative attitude." I laughed out loud in her face. I said, "Really, Ashley? Really? You're gonna go down that road? I can't stand her." Experiences from my family's company. My relatives are bosses. A man died of a drug overdose while working. He was found a couple of days later. He went to a secluded area with the needle still in his arm. My direct boss lived at work, started stealing, smoking marijuana in the shower. When he was let go, he got into the server and started shutting things down, so they were forced to bring him back. He's put back doors into the software of a couple companies he's been with. A new, pretty high up manager was brought in. He accidentally threw out the majority of the IT office's stored goods because it was junk, without asking anyone, was responsible for about 75% of employees in our only money making department to quit, leaving us few trained personnel. Didn't listen to anything you would say to him. He just kept saying yup, couldn't recall things later. Never understood anything in meetings, and basically had the intelligence of a bag of potatoes. No one liked this man. Anyone who met him instantly knew he was the sharpest bulb in the box. 4. A janitor that cleaned nothing and was discovered huffing cans of compressed air for 5 hours a day in the bathroom. 5. Before I started, a woman worked at our company. I don't know how well she did at work, but she bragged about A. Secretly feeding her husband drugs in his food, without his knowledge or permission. B. Cheating in his food, when she was mad at him. 6. A woman who seemed nice, but wasn't very productive. This wasn't so bad. However, when we found a dog on the property, she offered to take care of it. We found it next to her car, obviously poisoned. 7. Several managers in the maintenance department. Some lied about the technical skills they had, none. Others absolutely refused to walk around their faking job, and one stole goods/metal for us, then brought them to a metal scrapping company on his brother's account, faking him over. 8. Some idiot who drove a forklift through a wall. 9. We had a CFO who was an old guy I always thought was a little bit strange. Every time I walked into his office I found solitaire open on his computer, along with a website or two. The last 2 times I saw webcams of women stripping open, which he hurriedly closed. It was right before he was retiring, and his replacement still needed to learn some things from him, so nothing came of it. It turned out that he had essentially done nothing for the past 2 to 3 years, and there was a mad scramble to fix his incompetence. We apparently should have utterly failed an audit, so he probably had a deal with the auditor he had before that. That's what I heard from the people who replaced him, anyway. 10. One of our people started looking for other jobs on Monster.com at work, and management caught on, and had her train her successor. On her last day of work, she handed out checks as usual, but also explained to everyone that her replacement was gay, and she tried everything to get him to admit it, but he refused to. I had liked her before that, but I lost all respect for her that day. I couldn't care less about the guy's orientation. He was straight, or didn't want to talk about it. Either way, she decided to take petty revenge on a guy who had done nothing to her. I had a young woman who worked for me in a retail store once. She got through the training, then had a lot of returns by customer due to faulty product 12 in 1 week. I knew something was wrong, because the timing of the sales and returns did not add up. Some were just 10 to 15 minutes apart. This can happen, but it is usually all the same item line. Hers were not. When I asked where the returns were to send them back to corporate, she said she just threw them away because they were no good. I told her she can't do that because we have to send bad merch back. The next day, I saw her wearing one of the items in question, but had no record of her buying it through our inventory system. $80 skirt and blouse. She said her sister bought it before she started working there. Not possible. This line came out after you started working here. Told my supervisor, who said to fire her on the spot. Fired her. Then she shows up 3 hours later with all the stuff and asks if she gives it back can she have her job back. We took the stuff, then said no. Obviously, she then tried to tell unemployment we fired her without cause and took her employee purchases and did not refund her money. Unemployment heard our side of the story then refused to pay her anything. I had another one that personnel brought in that would lean on every horizontal surface during the orientation. He lasted 2 days. I caught him scratching "I hate this" faking place into the counter on his second day. Really? Could not make it a week. A third one saw another employee limping and asked why he limped, and the other employees explained that he got hurt when a stock shelf collapsed. His exact words were "I'll bet he is set for life. Maybe if I get hurt I can be set for life too." 4 other employees heard him say this at the lunch table that day. Comes in next day and claims to be hurt. All 4 witnesses were in my office to tell me about that exchange before he got back from the fired. Coworker of mine really grinds my gears. She's constantly complaining that she doesn't get enough hours. She doesn't like her hours, etc. But then she turns around and calls in at least once a week. I've covered more shifts for her than I can count. The one that bothered me most was a couple weeks ago. Coworker had gone on her annual 1-week vacation and was expected back Tuesday. Tuesday rolls around, no call, no show. Supervisors try to get a hold of her, but not much luck, so they leave message. They start asking did replacements. Nobody wants her shift. Finally, I agreed to stay, despite the fact that I had been there since 10 AM and it was a closing shift. Also, they get a hold of a family member who says she's caught in weather. The other cashier hears this and says, but she only went to Oklahoma. We live in Texas. The OK border isn't too far. So, I worked a 14-hour shift because she couldn't bother to come in on time because she was gambling in Oklahoma. She also takes extremely frequent smoke breaks whenever she feels like it. She's rude to customers who make her put in any extra effort. She criticizes me if I take more than exactly 15 minutes on my break. I hate talking about people like this, but damn, this is frustrating. In my previous job, I worked for a managed IT services provider and permanently placed at a client. In a team of 8, I was the second in command by virtue of seniority. One quiet afternoon, the facilities manager and the security manager walked into my office, asked me to send everyone else out, then told me one of my guys was suspected of stealing a bottle of expensive alcohol. JW Blue was missing from a conference room. They had the guy on camera how he entered and left the conference room with his bag. I told them the employee in question had just gone home, so they scrambled and managed to get him at the gate before he walked out. Asked to search his bag, and out came not only the bottle of blue, but 2 more bottles of cheaper alcohol and a small assortment of soft drinks. Guy admitted to it on the spot and spent the night in police custody. Since the team manager was on leave at the time, I had to deal with the subsequent disciplinary hearing. Luckily the guy had the common sense to plead guilty to all charges, which saved me a lot of potential headaches. He was summarily dismissed. At the same place, another guy mucked around with sick leave for months. He legitimately had something wrong with his eyes, but didn't have the brains to get himself sorted out, even though the company did everything they could to help him. We even ended up communicating with his doctor on his behalf. Eventually the time came where we couldn't get hold of him. He had moved from his known address, changed his phone numbers, and didn't bother to get in touch. He was dismissed in absentia for absconding. A bit later we found out he had taken on another job somewhere, while we have still employed by us. We had a guy who worked in the telesales depot who had a habit of phoning fax machines and having a conversation with them in order to make it look like he was hitting his quota of calls for the day. He also did this odd thing of typing with one finger on one hand and using the other hand to stroke some of the other keys to make it sound like he was typing really fast. But the final straw was when he called up a lead, finished speaking to the woman, and then phoned one of the other sales reps and said, "Yeah, just spoke to woman at company. She doesn't really seem interested. A bit of beach really, but I thought I'd pass her on to you in case you want to follow up." The sales rep hung up. Turns out he'd somehow managed to hit radial rather than calling the sales rep and was calling this woman a beach. After quite a while of nonsense like this, they got rid of him, upon which he tried to sue the company for religious discrimination, because apparently the boss had left anti-Muslim pamphlets on his desk, which he hadn't, which offended him as he's Muslim. He's not. Needless to say, the case got dropped quite quickly. I train management staff and coach them through difficult situations. There is one difficult scenario that comes up from time to time. Stinky as employees. Sometimes it's a cultural thing, sometimes it's just being a dirty ass, but it gets to a point where their co-workers are reporting the smell. Then we have to tactfully advise them to take a shower. I once had a gentleman from Rwanda. We had this problem with him, and when I confronted him, he said that he was not showering in protest. It turns out he was upset that he had been written up for sleeping on the job. He worked 2 full-time jobs, 80 to 90 hours a week, but he didn't work when he was around. He just kind of hung out. This was a union environment. I would have torched him otherwise. His position was that, because he worked so many hours, he had to make a choice to sleep or shower. And since we weren't allowing him to sleep at work, then he had to sleep at home, which meant he had no time to shower. So he presented me with his solution. He would shower at home if we would allow him to take the occasional nap at work. Otherwise, he would not shower. His union rep was trying to stand strong for him. He was proposing that considering the years of service he has provided, that we should extend his breaks and let him sleep on his breaks. In the end, I decided to fight fire with fire. I left the stinky guy and his union rep in my office with the door shut while I stepped out. I did that 3 times so I could get some fresh air. The union rep eventually caved because the stench was so bad he couldn't stay in the office any longer. Because particular site was union and I dealt with a lot of our issues, I had a camera in my office. The video of that was hilarious. The union rep was saying, "Damn man, once we get through this, you have to take a shower or something." I'm about to gag. I used to be a supervisor for a Spencer gifts store, and I had this one employee who was walking around the store putting things back where they belonged. He came up to me with a pair of Playboy boxers and asked if I thought they were glow in the dark. The tag didn't say so, but it appeared to have that green stuff you normally see on glowing stuff. I said it looks like it might be. You could probably take it into the bathroom and turn the lights off if you really want to know. A couple hours later I go to the bathroom and see on the floor the tags of the boxers. I sighed and put them in my pocket. I reported it to the store owner who had a conversation with him. He denied it, of course, and quit about a week later. When discussing the incident with another employee, I found out that the two of them had a discussion about the underpants thief possibly quitting so he could collect unemployment. It was during that conversation that he found out that you can't just quit and file for unemployment. We theorized that this poorly planned theft was an attempt to get fired, but somewhere along the line he discovered that you also couldn't collect unemployment at the age of 17. I worked the night shift at a company where we were in charge of hundreds of machines and required 3 guys to watch all of the different services. We hired a new guy who was from another company that my non-technical boss says is a seasoned veteran because he came from another big company. We were working the graveyard shift, 11 PM to 9 AM, and this guy just stops making noise. I look over, and he has his hood on and is asleep. My coworker and I start making loud fake coughing noises to wake him up. He eventually wakes up and says nothing, goes down the hallway, finds a couch, and starts sleeping there. He has a notebook that he has been taking notes in all of the time. The weird part was he never remembered anything I told him about how things worked. I opened his notebook too. I shit you not, pages and pages of the words blah blah blah. He was fake note taking. Why make the effort to write if you will always write the same thing? That makes no sense. It still took my boss 10 days to fire him after that. I was put on charge of a new person who would be working as my coworker in its stuff. She was on her 40s while I was my 20s then. I was shocked that she didn't know anything. I mean anything about computers, servers and networking. She just stared at me while I was explaining to her what we were going to do for her week. I asked her straight that how did she got the job. I knew that the place I was working had quite rough interviews. She didn't tell me. Few days pass, and I do all the work. She just watches what I do and randomly asks some questions. After that day I went to my boss and asked what the deal was with her. Found it out that she was boss's close relative and I was supposed to give her a chance. Well challenge accepted. I tutored her every day, what I was doing, and even went to her place to teach her some more. This was a mistake, big mistake. She took it as a flirt, big time. I mean she was not bad looking at all, quite the MILF without the kids. But if there's one rule I've never broken, it's never fuck with your coworker. This went on for a month or so, then I got really bad flu and had to stay at home for 3 weeks. Everything was okay with my boss. The doctors sent notifications about my condition to him. But at that time I was preparing quite big deal for the company that would probably got me at least a raise in salary or maybe even one step higher in the ladder. And of course, while I was sick, all my work was transferred to her. The deal was made, computers and servers sold, company lost around 80,000 euros with it. She had sold the hardware lower than our company had purchased it. What I had calculated was the winnings would have been around 60,000 euros. Basically modernize it to this day, they bought a 1,000 euros laptop for 10 euros. The day when I got back to work was shitty as it can be. Boss had mailed me that there will be a afternoon meeting where higher ups are present and we discuss the failed deal. So, there she was sitting, sobbing about getting fired. Didn't talk to her at all, was in middle of saving my own, as while gathering info and documents, that what had happened. Meeting started with awkward formalities, and then the higher ups gave their loss report and demanded excuse. Well, my boss had some coughing when he told them what had happened, and that she was responsible for it, and of course adding me as a one failure in it too. Damn boss, trying to save his own ass. She just sobbed the entire thing trough, and didn't even defend herself. After my boss had said what he wanted, we took a break, and during the break the higher ups sent my boss on his way with a sobbing relative, and told me to get there by myself. Why? Well, the deal was done by me and their perspective. Putting it short, I showed them my entire plan, told them that my boss had hired an incompetent partner for me, and that I was sick, while the deal was finalized. This took about 3 hours. Then one of higher ups picked up a phone. There were 3 of them, and called my boss, and it went like this: Mr. blah blah blah, you're fired as well, your relative. Goodbye. I was 99% sure that I would be fired at the spot. But no. Hell, I got my boss's job and the first thing for next day was to hire 2 persons under my watch. Damn, lucky me. But as I mentioned before, my ex-coworker was quite the hottie, so when she called that we should get drunk because we were fired, I accepted the offer. Being boss means you can come to office around 10 AM. Went to her place and she let it all out, emotional stuff, and she actually had learned quite a bit about computers while working and me tutoring. And it would seem that she didn't know that I got promotion. She thought I was fired too and was feeling guilty about it. Few drinks later things went towards such. Ended up sleeping with her. Never broken my rule about sleeping with coworker. She was fired. Morning came and I told that I need to get back to work. Her face? Priceless. TLDR. Got screwed at work due to boss's relative and got ill. At the end got promotion and banged my former coworker. The games industry tends to have its fair share of strange folks working in it. I had one person who, whenever they came in late, wanted to be physically punished for their sins. They also watched hardcore porn whilst at their desk, when they were meant to be modeling some cute kids game characters. Oh, and they also decided during the pre-Christmas party let's all email lookalikes of each other around session, to send a pic of a blacked up Al Johnson as a lookalike for one of our employees. That caused a fair bit of hassle. Had another person who was a proper old school coder. They kept asking for a raise. They were getting well paid at the time, and after a few weeks of being turned down, lost the plot one day by standing up, throwing their keyboard onto the desk with a scream of "fuck you all" before walking out, never to be seen again. One other guy who said he needed to move 500 miles to work from home to look after an elderly parent. Being a considerate employer, we allowed it only for them to do next to nothing and never be available on IM or Skype. Basically they got paid for a year for doing virtually nothing, and each time we pulled them up they quoted disability discrimination legislation as they were their parents' carer. Within a few days of us close the company, I had reference requests for them for positions the other side of the world, some carer. When I was working at one of the major platform holders, we had a guy in CA who was leaking all the builds to the Whereas groups. Prior to joining CA he was a security guy there. As a long-time manager who has had to let people go in the past, I have learned the following lessons. Low-end jobs will unfortunately attract the least intelligent people. This is understandable and obvious. There are always more low-end jobs, so you end up with a lot of dumbass on staff. Dumbass are always far more aggressive and prone to violence and arrogant attitudes than higher-end staff. They have more trouble forming verbal arguments and responses, and get frustrated, and swing to violence and threats. Dumbers always end up with the jobs with potential for injuring themselves, or others with heavy machinery, forklifts, trucks etc. No dumbers with should ever be in charge of heavy machinery, trucks, forklifts etc. See point 4. Lower end workers hate that higher end staff get more perks, higher pay etc. Just because he is the CEO he should not have the parking spot near the door. He is out half the day anyway. Lower end workers start and end on time and never work from home, fly on their weekends, pull an all-nighter to finish a report etc. point, but will still think a manager is lazy because he comes in at 10 AM sometimes. They will then tell everybody that will listen what a lazy wanker he is. They also think it's okay to talk about management like that to anybody that will listen, including other managers. Low-end workers are always being persecuted or victims when they fuck up, and you have to correct them or fire them. That guy in the car cut me off. I had to follow him 2 blocks and hit him with the cement truck to teach him a lesson. It's his fault, not mine. See point 4. Again. All low-end workers think the office guys are worthless. It's them that get the stock on the trucks. They will never understand that if sales did not sell the stuff it would not need to be on a truck. God help me, I'm so jaded after 30 years of managing staff. We employed a woman who, during the interview process, appeared to be a great candidate. As soon as she was hired and all paperwork was processed, her true personality began to shine through. She started showing up outside of her scheduled shifts to ask about getting more hours, but dressed in very inappropriate attire, tank top, no bra, and cut-off jean shorts. For example, she would often show up when we only had one manager working the floor and demand we speak with her, even though we obviously had to help customers. She would then get angry because we were ignoring her. Even while helping customers she would either become angry with them or just completely space out and forget what she was doing. That put her on thin ice, and we took her off the sales floor and scheduled her exclusively for faucets. We were in bad need of help, and so were slow to fire her until we could hire other people. One day she comes in for a big faucet and is completely out of it, wandering around, forgetting our instructions, spacing out. We had recently hired new people and her trial period of 3 months was almost up, so we decided to let her go after this faucet. When we told her, she began to scream at us and threaten legal action, saying that she needed this job because she needed money to support her kids and pay for her medications, and that this job had out a financial burden on her because she had to take 2 or 3 Vicodin before each shift in order to deal with the pain. After admitting that she came in hopped up on drugs every shift, it was not only much easier to fire her, but we also then understood her very strange behavior. TLDR, hire a woman and learn she came to work high on Vicodin every shift. This is from my mother. She was a team manager in a call center. Said she had the psychiatric team at one point because almost every person on her team, save for 2, had a diagnosed mental disorder. She said she really didn't care or have issues with most of them, but 2 were odd. One was a woman who claimed to have been diagnosed as bipolar, but they found out later she was actually paranoid schizophrenic. She apparently stopped taking her meds. She then became convinced that my mother, her manager, was trying to kill her via topical poison on her keyboard. So my mother sat down at the woman's desk and proceeded to use the keyboard, and her employee merely huffed, "Well, you have the antidote, duh." No amount of other people using it would convince her, so they got her a new keyboard that she got to take out of the box shiny and new. A couple of days later, someone went into the women's restroom and found her sitting in her desk chair in front of a sink looking at herself in the mirror. When they asked her if she was okay, she merely said to them in a very conversational tone, "I'm fine, just having a bowel movement." This person ran and got my mother, who went in the bathroom to find the woman making quite the mess of her computer chair. So she called the woman's emergency contact, her mother, who said, "Damn it, she's off her meds again." The woman's mother gets there and carts her off to be committed and put back on her meds, and is the one that informs my mother of her daughter's actual diagnosis. The other was a man that was also diagnosed as bipolar. My mother was convinced to use that as an excuse to get away with stuff, though. He had no concept of personal space and would invade other people's on a near daily basis. He loved to sneak up on people and look over their shoulders and then startle them by pointing out mistakes or whatnot they were making. He also had a tendency to scope people to find out their passwords and then log on as them and change things. That is what got him fired. Other people were being written up or even threatened with firing for making changes to people's credit accounts until they noticed that pretty much everyone was able to point at how they were logged out on their phone for break at the time. So they started looking at security footage of the floor from those days and times and saw that every single time he was waiting until someone left their desk, logging in, mucking with things, and then logging off. He got fired post haste and then sued, claiming he was fired due to his mental illness and it was discrimination. He lost, of course, as soon as the security footage was shown. I have had a lot of the same problems over and over with employees: chronic lateness and chronic calling in sick, wanting days off to take care of personal business all the time, such as getting their car fixed, or minor home repairs, or babysitter/dog sitter/personal relationship instability. Generally just not comprehending that real life isn't like TV, where you just show up for work for a minute here and there when there's nothing else going on in your life. Also the boundary pushers. I'm pretty lax on dress code. I don't mind colorful hair, artful tattoos and interesting fashion, but if you want your face spiked up like a pincushion and shirts with aggressive, sexual, or offensive stuff on them, you need to do that after hours, because it chases away customers. You gotta at least look friendly and not intimidating, however alternative you want to be, and some people just don't seem able to accept that there exists some social norms, and you have to not upset the social norms too much, or customers won't give you their money and thus, you will not continue to have a job if we can't pay you anymore. Also people who want their work hours adjusted or shortened to allow them time to walk or bike to work. I'm happy for you and admire your commitment to your health and or the environment or whatever, but that doesn't mean I'm going to pay you for 40 hours when you're only working 30. Also, please don't make me talk to you about your hygiene and tell your faking boy/girlfriend/wife/mother to call you at home, not at work. Unless it's an emergency, of course, or at least not almost every day. Also, you can internet all you want when there's nothing going on and the side work is all caught up, but you better not be a whinniers when something actually needs to be done. And don't be staring at the screen when there's customers around. They don't want to feel like they are interrupting you, so don't make them feel that way. Not a boss, but an assistant manager at a gas station. I worked with a real winner, let's call him Bob. Bob was literally the most irritating, two-faced scumbag I have ever met. When you were around, he was obnoxiously friendly, over the top. He liked to sing songs, but at your name in, for instance, Little Walking Down the Street. When you were away, he could not stop talking shit about you. He worked nights and I asked the other night employees if he ever talked about me. They both laughed and said, dude, you are the topic of conversation. Turns out, Bob wanted my job and thought getting a promotion worked like Roman emperors. He kept trying to get me fired, wouldn't do a job and blame it on me, spread rumors I was stealing etc. Just to emphasize how much scum he was. His best friend and the other assistant manager, who took Bob in after his wife kicked him out, didn't show up for his shift and didn't call an automatic termination where I worked. What does Bob do? He literally struts around the store with his hands on his hips saying new assistant manager coming through. Thankful, he got fired and arrested. He ended up attempting to steal $15K because our manager forgot to lock the safe. He got chased by the police and sent to jail. He'll never work a job handling cash again. I should feel bad, but I really don't. Waiter here. Okay, so I was a fairly young member of the workforce, the youngest full-time worker by a long way, taking some time out between college and university, and had recently been up to a pseudo supervisor, meaning I was in charge on quiet shifts when the more senior staff members weren't in. The aforementioned youth was a big issue in getting some staff member to listen to me. Hell, some refused to even work with me, but it was hampered even more by being the only male workers in a workforce filled with bitter middle-aged wives who blamed all men for the fact that they were working a student's jobs well into their 40s. Anyway, on one shift, we had a surprise table of 16 people book. Being just me and one other person, I figured we could get it done as I knew what had to be done where and how it would be laid out. I was in charge of that shift, so I figured I could get this woman, let's call her Jay, to assist me with sorting things out. No way was she going to take instructions from a chauvinistic pig, so she went to go water the flowers while I did the actual important work. This was in November. The flowers were already drenched. Anyway, I got it done just in time and she decided to assist me in serving the table. It was all going great till she decided to collect a round of drinks. Fair enough, but she decided to lean right across the table to give people drinks. FYI, terrible practice to do that, and she knocked over the candles sitting in the center of the table in the process. This of course caught fire to the tablecloth with all the people surrounding it. Now here's the kicker. I'm still getting food from the kitchen, and I walk out just in time to see her trying to pat it out with napkins. They of course also catch fire. Miss J then decides it's a great idea to try and put it out with the drinks on her tray. Seeing as this was a restaurant combined with a pub, it was primarily strong alcohol, which only made it angrier. By this time, I'm at the table, and I put it out with my hand. It was really bloody hot. My hand was splashed with burning alcohol too, just to add insult to injury, and I'm left unable to do shit for a few weeks. I left shortly afterwards with the promise of unlimited free drinks whenever I come back to visit. It's not that I hated her, well actually, I did. She was horrible, but it's the fact that she was so mind-numbingly stupid in a clutch situation. Worst employee ever. TLDR, woman sets fire to tablecloth, tries to put it out with tissue and alcohol. I was a shift manager with a shitty boss once. I was 16 and applied for a job at a major ice cream kingdom. The creeper owner hired me before I even filled out the application, probably because I was only expecting to fill out an application and had worn short shorts and a tank top and had huge boobs for a teenager. I was a great employee, always 15 minutes early, always cleaning, could pick up new tasks easily, and one of the few people who could run both the counter and drive through at the same time successfully. It was maybe 2 months before I was promoted to shift manager. Over the course of the next 4 months, the boss tried repeatedly to get in my pants. He would even try getting the other girls to go home early, so I would have to close by myself with him in the store. Thankfully the other girls knew better and always said they needed the money or didn't mind staying their full shift. One morning I go into work to open by myself. The usual. Everything goes fine. One customer came to the window and one to the drive-thru. I'll let them both know that it will be a minute before I can complete their orders because I had just opened and the ice cream wasn't even cold enough to serve. Drive-thru customer came to the window and all three of us had a great conversation while we waited. Got their orders taken care of and went about our business. The next day I come in for my afternoon shift and the assistant manager pulls me aside and asks me what happened the day before. I have no idea what she's talking about. She shows me a letter that was dropped off saying that they were a customer who came to the drive-thru and I yelled at them saying that we weren't open yet and that they came to the walk-up window and that I continued to yell at them and slammed the window shut. They waited until I could get their order, and when I did, I was snotty and slammed the window shut again. I told the assistant manager that it wasn't true and she could watch the tapes. She said the manager didn't care and that he couldn't have me as an employee with that kind of a complaint on me and that I had to leave immediately and bring back my uniform shirt later. I said fuck it, took off the uniform shirt right there and handed it to her and walked out in my bra. TLDR was fired by a creepy boss because he couldn't get in my pants. Edit. Spacing. Not a boss, but still a good story. I work as an on-site technician at a large site. There are about 10 of us on site and we usually deal with separate areas. However, we have no supervisor or manager on site. Because of the way a new ticketing system was set up, some of the techs had to email tickets to other techs in order for them to get it. So one guy comes in, and he's worked phone support before, but he's new to the on-site thing. We try to train him as best we can, but he always has some sort of issue. He couldn't even do the most basic of tasks that he had be repeatedly shown. It got to the point where the guy who had to email him his tickets would just do many of them himself, in addition to his own, because he knew he'd have to go redo them anyways if he sent the new guy. I later found out he just started doing all of the new guy's tickets. So I don't see him for a while. Not a big deal, since we didn't really have a central location on site. And all of a sudden I get a call from my off-site manager asking me how long since I've seen him. I say probably a couple of weeks, though I realized it was over a month afterwards, and he thanks me and says bye. From what I gather, the new guy basically just stopped showing up on site. Not that I blame him. He had nothing to do but sit around waiting for a ticket that would never come. But he still submitted hours for a full day of work, no clock in process, no managers on site, etc. I was worried they'd start to implement a draconian tracking process, but fortunately my boss saw it as a one-time thing. I mean, I could understand showing up, doing nothing but surfing the web all day because you weren't given any tickets, and submitting hours for it. I can understand if you just stop coming in because you weren't given anything to do. But not coming in and submitting hours? That's just going too far. I worked with a girl who always came in 15 to 20 minutes late, always saying that's what time my train gets me here. It never occurred to her to catch an earlier train, given that they pretty much run every 15 or 30 minutes depending on where you live. So it really was her responsibility to just wake the fuck up a half hour earlier every day. So anyway, the manager warned her if she kept it up her shift would get moved back 30 minutes and she'd start at 9:15 and have to stay back till 5:30 if she couldn't be at her desk by 8:45 am like everyone else. Keeping in mind this was a call center where the lines closed at 5 p.m. So she'd pretty much be staying back just to do busy work, but this was a compromise offered if she couldn't get in on time. She cried bloody murder about how it was fair he wasn't keeping her back an extra half hour. She honestly couldn't comprehend how it wasn't okay to roll into work late and expect to get paid for it. Of course, she never got to work on time, not even once. The very next day she was late as usual and my manager gave her this look as she rolled in, like seriously, and she tried to explain it really wasn't her fault this time and she would have been in on time, if not for reasons. He gave her another chance and she blew it. Bam, shift moved back a half hour. That Friday when everyone was leaving to meet up for drinks she sat there all sour and sheet, bitching about how she couldn't come because the boss is an asshole. After 2 weeks of coming in at her usual, late, time, she asked to have her shifts moved back. She thought by demonstrating punctuality on her modified schedule, that was good enough, and she could go back to the way things were. Nope. Boss said she had to demonstrate she could come in at the proper time and he'd consider it. Of course she complained that would mean she was starting half an hour earlier for no reason, and it never happened. I'm guessing the boss didn't have the authority to effect this change permanently or officially, so when upper management got wind of her coming in late all the time following our annual performance reviews, questions were asked. She was placed on performance management, which she was very vocal about, and hustled out the door in a matter of weeks after demonstrating she was incapable of modifying even one of the various issues she was having in her work performance. I've been looking for work for a month. The fact that people like this are pulling paychecks, trashing companies and ditching their jobs is like deer Zachary to me right now. I'm crying here. To contribute, I was a morning shift waitress for 5 years at this greasy spoon across from the airport in Marline, IL. Many of my coworkers were sketchy, but awesome people, but this one woman would occasionally be scheduled to work with me in the morning, and she never showed up. Nothing like working a $4,000 morning shift and handling the whole place completely alone. Needless to say, I loathed this woman by the second time she left me in that position. She only kept her job because she was close friends with the accountant who ran the place. The owners were elderly and ill. Eventually the aforementioned accountant promoted this no-show to personnel manager. I was at the meeting where this was announced, and the news horrified me so much that I turned to her and demanded, "Are you going to show up?" "Yeah." She deadpans at me. Well, less than 2 months into the job, she stopped showing up. The woman hired as drawer manager was a known thief who stole the place blind, and before the year was out the restaurant was closed. That was an excellent job too. I'd probably still be there if all this BS hadn't gone down. The first person I ever became the line manager of, I was 18. He was in his 30s, so there was a lot of respect issues due to the age gap. We hit it off immediately and broke every company record in our first month in a store together. Problem with the guy was I was still inexperienced as a manager and had to learn the hard way. Guy could sweat talk his way out of murder. The usual terrible timekeeping, poor work performance when nobody was watching kinda deal. Problems started when he showed up to work 2 hours late with painted nail, body glitter and still drunk. Couldn't get him any disciplinary action because I was seen to be blowing things out of proportion, and stupid me didn't want to lose a friend or good employee instead of setting an example of what's expected. As a freshly appointed manager, all my actions regarding staff needed area manager approval, so nothing became of this, except it was known I had tried. Second offense was him trying to get back at me for trying to get him the disciplinary by destroying confidential records that need to be kept for 6 years. My time for an audit came around, and as you can imagine I got screwed quite hard for it, as it was part of my job to look after that stuff. He later admitted this to me a few years later, after bumping into each other. The final straw that he couldn't escape from was a staff party. He had paid to go, but was unable to come due to a lack of money for beer. I left early to get home, get ready and come back to pick up my stuff, and he had suddenly become 50 pounds richer. I thought nothing of it and proceeded to have a great night. Come the next working day, I was checking the money in the safe to find a £50 discrepancy. Many phone call later he was due to come in and have an opportunity to save his job with a sob story. He realized the gravy train was ending and didn't even bother to show up. He for intensive purposes quit before I could fire him. Learned a lot from that guy despite how much of a pain in the ass he was. Being young and in a position over someone older always brings out hostility, and the only way to bring it under control is to make it clear from the start you're the boss first. I went in trying to befriend an employee, trying to be the boss everyone wants, instead of being the boss who would kick him out, and it bit me in the ass when I tried to do anything different. Not a boss, but this was a story about my bosses. I use the term bosses in quotations because they don't deserve a real title. The owner was the boss that hired me. She had clearly never run a restaurant before. She was clueless, talked down to most of her employees, and generally made me feel like crap. Granted, this was my second job, and I was just using it as extra income because it was the summertime and I wouldn't have done much else with my time. So I'm preparing food on my first day, and she pulls me aside to tell me the protocol for breaks. She clearly outlines to me, during your break, come out to this table and eat your free employee meal. You can cook whatever you want, but just don't go overboard. I tell her thanks, take my break/meal. It was a 4-hour shift, and she told me that whenever I worked, I needed to take a break and return to work. So a few weeks later, I notice my second boss come in. This guy's at least 27 and still working in a burger joint. No offense to those of you that fallen on hard times and had to work fast food. It's just really clear that this guy didn't want anything more out of his life/career. Every night I see him walking out with a to-go box full of various foods such as chicken strips, Philly cheesesteaks, burger patties, etc. Keep in mind, this guy is a manager and is getting manager pay. He always talks about smoking and toking up after work when we are in earshot of the customers. I decided not to say anything and just work around it. I wasn't planning on staying here too long anyways. So, I told the owner some weeks later that I'm gonna have to leave because school is starting back and I can't swing 2 jobs and school. She says, and I quote, "Yeah, I can kinda tell that this job is too complicated for you. You always seem like you're having a hard time here." Keep in mind, other than one screw up, I thought I worked harder than anyone else there. I just kindly tell her that I don't have the time and walk away. My girlfriend worked 2 doors down from this restaurant and decided one day to come in on her break. It happened that I was taking my break too, so we ate together. I cooked a sandwich and fries that I had always cooked for myself and gave her half of it. I never cooked any more food than I would eaten. I just figured I'd be nice to her and save her from buying an overpriced meal. This happened one Friday night and Saturday night. The only person I had worked with was my manager, who had been stealing food, and he never said anything about what I was doing being wrong or out of place. So Sunday morning I get a call, which I thought was for me to come into work. I answer it, and it's my boss who says there's been an issue of you taking breaks when you aren't supposed to have been, and you giving extra meals to someone that doesn't work here. It's really obvious that you don't care about working here anymore, so consider yourself fired. You having to take a break while working is ridiculous, and you shouldn't go off the line to eat your dinner. Don't bother coming in anymore. TLDR, model employee, went above and beyond what was asked and did what I was told. Got sold out by a food stealing manager and fired for something I was told was okay. Not a boss, but worked at a call center that was on the verge of closing 4 years with an impossibly high turnover rate for management. Explains how this possibly happened. Evening staff were all 20 somethings, he was 50. Multiple times caught googling naked pregnant women on work computer. All employees work in one room. Would spew accurate random serial killer facts. Once announced that he was grateful for the invention of YouTube so he could hear his favorite serial killers' voices. Expressed an interest in seeing me in a wet t-shirt contest. Browsed guns online. Keep in mind this is Canada. And visited freshest.com, again on work computer. In addition to that, would make personal calls on work phone while on shift. Recorded. Ate lunches out of the fridge. Very noticeable when there are 3 ppl on. And got a nosebleed, where instead of going to the washroom let it bleed on the carpet for 15 minutes. When management positions were finally filled and someone got the avalanche of emails/reports, a courier was sent to his house to get his pass key and was fired over the phone. Unheard of before then. Oh, and let us all know that he was let go from his other job for threatening to shoot the place up, although he claimed he had said chew the place up. I used to work with a couple of low-grade morons who must be mentioned. Back in college, I used to work up in Prudhoe Bay during the summers in order to make money to pay for my college. There were a group of us, all college-age students of parents who worked for the oil company we worked for. These 2 idiots, athletes at their respective universities naturally, were your classic drug-snorting layabouts. Funny how supposed athletes can be 10x lazier than your average physics student, but there you have it. The 2 geniuses took off with one of our trucks one afternoon for some unknown reason. After a while, we realize these idiots have been gone a long time. Next thing we know, we are getting reports of an accident over the radio. We have no reason to go check it out, but it's near quitting time and the rest of us have a strong suspicion of who might have been involved. So, we drive over to the scene and these morons have driven there off the road, down onto the tundra, and scraped it along the side of one of the insulated oil pipelines that moves oil from the drilling pads to pump stations. The truck continued until they ran it into the I-beam supporting the pipelines above the tundra, pushing the left front end all the way back to the firewall. They had a couple of cranes and a D9 cat out there trying to extricate the thing. We had a good laugh seeing them slunk down in the back seats of the security dude's SUV. Later heard that their excuse was that they were trying to avoid hitting a fox. Yeah, sure. Couldn't have been that you doing something stupid at forbidden speeds. After an accident like that, they have to shut down production, get out the expensive X-ray equipment that goes ping in order to make sure they haven't damaged the pipes, and then re-insulate it before winter sets in, which was not that far away. I love me some athletes. I work at a call center fairly low on the totem pole, but not absolute rock bottom. We tend to have two kinds of employees here. Those that stay for years and years, and those that are out within a month. The guy I'm speaking of, call him Colin, should have been the latter, but he somehow managed to stick around for 5 months. Now, Colin was what I think you call a bro. He was a backwards baseball cap, sag-pantsed frat house monkey. He'd come into work every day, without fail, and hock his iPod up to a little set of sheety speakers, then blast whoever was sitting beside him with truly bad rap music until the bosses arrived to shut it up. If he'd been taking calls, that would have been one thing, but Colin took about 10% of the calls that came to his screen. He spent the rest of the time surfing Wikipedia for vaguely pornographic pictures of Amazonian tribeswomen. It was one of like 5 websites we could use on the proxy. What finally got him fired was he showed up one Monday so drunk he parked sideways in the boss's parking spot, then kicked his way through the glass front door when it wouldn't open fast enough for him. He wasn't wearing any underwear and still didn't have a belt on. He sat down at his desk, put his hand down the front of his pants 2 cubicles over, and proceeded to give himself pleasure. The bastard had a drunken wank next to me. Thankfully, I was off shift in 5 minutes, so I just ditched. Let someone else clean up the wasted fack. All I heard from management was that Colin had been fired that day. I don't know what for, specifically, but I can only imagine. Unknowingly hired a guy with narcissistic personality disorder. He had a master's degree and I didn't, so he got really offended when I asked him to do anything. Thought he should be running things instead, but instead of legitimately showing up in management he was capable of leadership. He just sulked and beached and acted, put out all the time. We logged our hours against various projects and he just refused to do it, so I had no idea what was taking him so long to finish stuff. When I pushed him to track his time, he put in his notice. Thank God, I thought. Oh no, I had no idea the lengths to which NPD people will go for revenge. On his last day, he sent an email to my boss accusing me of sleeping with my employees and doing hard drugs in my office. Luckily everyone knew he was a nutcase by then, but I did attend quite a few meetings with upper management and hours to explain about him and to deny the allegations. Never again. Hiring managers, if someone is extremely charming and confident, ask leading questions to verify resume details. Ask why/he left other jobs. See if there's a defensiveness that strikes out like a snake at very little provocation. You do not want one of these folks on staff. I was 25 and given a management job for the first time, running a satellite office/warehouse about 90 miles from the main office. We get deliveries every morning from the main office and the driver's only job is to drive the truck up and down New Jersey, help unload, and drive back up. The warehouse was a typical warehouse full of heavy metal parts and the such. The driver showed up on his first day. He had a second person in the truck for the first few drives, in flip-flops, and I knew right off the bat, this guy was not going to last, and I told my supervisor, one step below the company's owner, that this guy will end up costing us money. Over the course of 2 months, this guy would get lost every once in a while, driving the exact same route every single day. Anytime we'd ask him to wait a couple of minutes, he'd get puffy and impatient. He'd drive the truck down roads where they are clearly marked as no business trucks allowed. Every driver carries a company issued phone with the walkie-talkie feature, and when I would buzz him with a question, he'd pretend not to understand English. He was a native Spanish speaker, but definitely spoke enough English to get by. Sure enough, 2 months later, company fired him when we found out that he had been accruing a ton of tickets varying from running traffic signals, illegal turns, speeding, all the way to driving the truck down a parkway. Parkways are highways that forbid commercial trucks, and there are plenty of signage that states this rule. Also, we finally looked at his phone's records and sure enough, constant long distance calls to his country of origin. About a decade ago, I was managing what was at the time the busiest Subway in the region. The store was built into a mall food court, and the owners of the franchise were hands-on with a lot of the hiring at the time. A lot of the kids they hired were in high school, which is perfectly fine. But one of them was particularly bizarre. I couldn't have him taking orders or dress sandwiches because he moved slow and communicated poorly, and he could never remember the correct formula for sandwiches. I couldn't have him cut bread because he would frequently cut his fingers in the process. I couldn't have him on the register because he couldn't find the buttons on the screen. I eventually stuck him in the back where he would fail at washing dishes, which was fine because we really only needed them a couple of times a day to restock. I remember taking the time to train him on vegetable prep. I was going over the processes, and at some point, a song he was familiar with came on the radio. He interrupted me to tell me that he loved the song that was playing. Okay, fine. I tried to continue speaking to him about his job when he interrupted me again to ask if I knew who it was on the radio. I honestly didn't know. He then interrupted a third time to have me guess who it was. I told him that I didn't care. I remember that one day I started getting phone calls at the store from his guidance counselor at school, whom he decided to complain to about his job. I had started to schedule him fewer hours, simply because we could not deal with him, and we could not transfer him to another store. I remember being reasonable with him, and asking him about it the next time I saw him. I consider myself to be pretty laid back, but it is pretty annoying when someone wants to complain about you, and has someone else fight their battles. Probably the best part was that he came in with these homemade Subway flashcards he had made for practicing sandwich formulas at home. The funny thing about it was that he didn't know the formulas to begin with, and the flashcards he was memorizing were wrong. I don't remember his name, and I'll probably never know what he ended up doing in life. The worst employee I had to deal with was my own best friend. I was a front-end supervisor at a grocery store in high school. My buddy actually helped, got me the job. However, he was just a bagger. I worked my way up from bagger to supervisor. Anyway, once I became supervisor, he took heavy advantage of it. He never showed up on time to begin with, and he would always forget his hours. His thing would be to call up work and ask me when he was supposed to be in next. When I told him he was supposed to be in over an hour ago, his response would be something like, "Oh, damn. I'll be in an hour or so then." His other thing would be to ask me to take it easy on him in regards to chores that had to be done, putting back items, getting carts, cleaning, etc. because he was tired. He would also frequently call in late when he knew I was working. He also begged me to repencil the break schedule so he could go on breaks earlier at times. I never did him any favors and told him that outside of work we were friends, but at work, we were co-workers. Nothing more. The dumbest thing that he did was call out of work because he was sick. He then showed up to do some shopping later that day with a few friends. He walked up to talk to me and just bullshit with me, completely oblivious to the fact that he called in sick only a few hours before. This didn't happen just once either. My dad used to manage a brewery, handling the running of machinery etc. in England. For some reason that type of environment seems to just attract complete idiots. One example being a man who actually went by the name of Mango used to cover night shifts. For his lunch/snack he would bring in 2 or 3 bottles of the ale the brewery brewed, and a jar of pickled onions, not a small container, but a big as jar. He would then proceed to eat the pickled onions, and then drink the vinegar/brine sheet the onions float in, washing it down with the bottles of ale. Another example is a fabrication engineer who was asked to cut a hole into a control panel, large metal box with buttons, for a new piece of operating equipment going into a bottling line. He cut the hole to the exact size of the new control which promptly fell through the hole into the inside of the control panel never to be seen again. He was sacked a few months after for being an oxygen thief. Finally, my dad was sitting doing paperwork in his office one day and a notorious dumbfuck from the floor team came up asking if he could go home because he cheat himself. He told my dad he could check to make sure, that is make sure he was telling the truth. Needless to say he passed on the opportunity and let him go home and get changed. TLDR, don't work in breweries because people ask you to look into their shat pants. As someone who has a strong work ethic, nowadays, I have to say as a teen/young adult I did some stupid stuff while working. When working at a grocery store, and I don't know why I did this, would call out of work when I didn't want to work with stupid excuses like taking extra courses, I was in HS, or had a friend in the hospital I was visiting that was in a really bad accident. Of course I almost got fired, so that slapped me in the face and I stopped that sheet. Then I had an actual legit excuse though when, since I didn't drive yet, couldn't get in when they were scheduling me and had to be late. That they actually didn't have an issue with as I started staying later and doing some more to get stuff done, like mopping and the like. Then when working for What Rhymes with Halford, I had a pretty solid weekend schedule that for a long time was sat and sun like 7 AM to 4 or 5 PM. It was like that each weekend due to my school hours being so long in college, like 8 AM to 5:30 PM every day MF. The manager or managers didn't have an issue with it at all. Then, for some stupid reason, I stopped checking my schedule, having had gotten into a comfortable routine, and silently new management came in and made it so that if you worked less than so many hours a week they canned you. Then my schedule changed, and I apparently wasn't showing up. Oh, well fuck. So then I start showing up like a good doobie, and again, I was an idiot at the time, kids eh? Then a new debt manager comes in and starts faking with our schedules. Like I had to give her mine about 5 to 6 times in a span of 2 days because she'd keep losing it. This and the rest of the debt had the same issue. Anyways, she starts scheduling me all over the place and despite corrections, somehow she'd change the schedule in the middle of the week and then I would be unknowingly scheduled and absent. Almost got fired for that though this time it really wasn't my fault. That's about the time that reality sunk and I just found myself asking myself what the hell was wrong with me. I think just adopted a work ethic of working hard, being truthful and not being stupid. So far it's worked out well. Not me but one of my dad's employees. I also worked part-time for him, so I knew the employee who got fired. So the backstory is this guy's a nighttime janitor for a restaurant who does the cleanup after closing in preparation for the next day. He is also a big perv and has been caught napping on the job in the booth a couple of times and even watching TV, R-rated and other raunchy channels OFC. But these incidents stopped after we installed cameras in the restaurant. Biggest reason was to deter theft and dine and dashes, but keeping an eye on him was a plus. So about a year and a half ago he decides to use his vacation time and go back to India to visit family. The weird thing is his wife and kids aren't going with him, so we joke about how he's going down there to get some. So after he gets back nothing changes but a couple of months later he says he needs to go back again because a family member has passed away. He does have some vacation time left so we let him go again. Fast forward about half a year from then, and about 3 hours after closing the restaurant my dad gets a call from the police saying that the janitor and a woman have been the victims of an assault and both needed to be taken to the hospital. Turns out he was having an affair this whole time with those trips to India and brought a girl back with him. She had been bringing him food and they would sit in the parking lot in his car during his shifts. His wife and in-laws found out and obviously got pissed off and a few of them decided to take matters into their own hands and beat the shit out of both of them during one of his shifts. The best part is this story isn't over. Our restaurant is unionized, so we can't fire this guy so easily, even though he is a shitty worker and his dumb antics have caused us lots of problems. So he gets better, and we go incident free for almost a year. So we go to about 2 months ago where my dad gets a call from the janitor saying there's a problem with some appliances. My dad simply says, okay, don't do anything, we will let the electricians deal with it tomorrow. The janitor insists it will be an easy fix, but my dad adamantly says no. As you can guess he didn't listen. We get a call about an hour later from the fire department saying there was a fire at the restaurant. The circuit breaker was completely fried, and we had no power for the next day and a half. Luckily there was no damage anywhere else, but the cost of repairs alone was almost $10,000, adding in the loss of sales for a day and the food we had to toss because we couldn't refrigerate it. Remember those cameras we had installed? Well, it caught footage of him fiddling with the circuit breaker in the back, and you could pinpoint the exact moment the sparks fly out and burst into flames. That idiot's burnt his hand as a result and we finally had grounds to fire him. After all was said and done, we thought it was over. But since we are unionized, he went and complained and got the union leader involved, saying he was a dedicated employee for 20 years and was wrongfully fired and wants the unemployment insurance he would normally get from being laid off. Does worst boss make the list? I worked for a building and renovation company as a receptionist. I was 18 to 19 at the time and was pretty much fresh out of school. I did my best, but was constantly harassed by the old beast in charge. She was the company accountant and a horrid old woman. She was training the old receptionist as a junior accountant and had a secretary. Being the noob I would ask them why she was being so nasty to me, screaming at me for no reason, like clicking send error report. If it came up on the screen, they would just say she was like that to them, and it would settle down. All the builders that came in the office were timid around her and would sympathize with me about how vicious she was. One day she calls both the girls in her office separately for around 10 to 20 minutes each. Then she calls me in, throws a termination letter at me, and says, "I know you don't like me." I was stunned and said I had never said anything like that. She responds with, "That's not what I have been told." It sunk in. At that point the other girls had ratted me out. I was told not to finish the day and leave immediately. I learned a very important lesson about office politics from that job. Worked with a colleague that took more days of sick than anybody I've ever known. We both worked on a team of about 6 people for a large financial company, and each had to cover her work for days off sick, long lunches and all sorts of daily excuses. Over the course of a year it pretty much drove us all crazy, and needless to say she didn't have many friends at work. Our boss refused to fire her because he was too concerned about ours coming down on him, as she had confessed to having serious diabetes. Eventually, after taking at least a day off a week for about 6 months and claiming she felt victimized because of everyone being crazy tired of her, she stopped coming in and got signed off by a doctor for 3 months. A few weeks go by and then someone spots her working in a local pub pulling pints as a barmaid. Boss at work still refuses to fire her, as he claims she's not doing anything wrong, as she's only signed off from her day job and can do what she likes outside of it. My team was livid and still covering her shift, meaning odd for everyone, and people started handing their notices in as they couldn't handle it anymore. I transferred to a different department and found out a few months later she had returned and then bragged about finding a job in London at a different major bank and had finally left. I have no idea if this is true or how she could have expected any sort of decent reference, as she wasn't seen again. The manager we'd both had was moved to shortly afterwards too. I used to run a restaurant and hired almost exclusively Mexican and Latin American staff for the kitchen. Not that I wouldn't have hired any other applicants if they were qualified, it's just that most of my applications for kitchen positions were referred to me by current employees and so on. Anyway, I hired on this guy for a prep position, and when I was entering his info into our computer system, his social security number came up as invalid. When I asked him about it, he immediately produced another SS card and ID with a completely different name, numbers, etc. For whatever reason he managed to convince me to give him a chance, and it ended up proving to be one of the hardest working and best employees I had. Until that fateful day when he got pulled over for a minor traffic stop, which then escalated to detention and deportation, and managed to prompt an investigation by ICE that resulted in almost a third of my staff disappearing over the course of 24 hours. As far as I know, he was the only one deported. The rest just moved on to other jobs to avoid being possibly arrested/deported. It's probably unfair to say he was the worst employee I ever had, but by looking the other way when I knew full well he wasn't a legal immigrant, I put my whole kitchen at risk and ended up putting in a few 90-plus-hour weeks trying to keep the place on track. Anyway, before ya get all judgmental or say anything along the lines of "that's what ya get," keep in mind, in the restaurant business, ya don't get many legal immigrants or citizens applying for/taking kitchen positions for what I could afford to pay, around $9 to $11 hour. It's a lot of hard/stressful work that doesn't pay real well. TLDR, I hired an illegal immigrant that ended up costing me a lot of my staff. My guy was always sort of sketchy. We knew he had some drug problems/offenses in the past, but we thought he was over that. Near the end, and close to the event I'm going to relay, we heard rumors that he was smoking crack and sleeping in the basement of the restaurant I owned. We couldn't seem to catch him red-handed. Anyway, he told my partner that he was expecting a package soon. He gave the restaurant's address as the mailing address and asked him to sign for it if he wasn't there when it was delivered. I'll mention that we get a lot of business folks in for lunch at our place. So one day the ups guy delivers the package and the employee is actually there, so he signs for it and receives it. Right as this happens, a table of 4 or 5 suited men hops up, show their FBI badges and cuff him. Right there in the middle of the restaurant, and in the middle of service. People were pretty shocked. This is a fairly upscale place, not fine dining, but definitely not a dive. Anyway, we later find out that it was kiddie born that he had ordered. He goes to jail, again. I think previous offenses were drug related. They end up raiding his house, take computers, etc. The really scary part was that he was married and had a few small children as well. This was a number of years ago, but it was rough. Needless to say, we never rehired him. Story about my ex-boyfriend. He got a sales job at a clothing store and requested to work the women's section just so that he could hit on girls. But he knew nothing about women clothes and he pretty much sweet-talked the manager to get the job. A customer asked him to find something off-white and he found her a white shirt. He was supposed to go in every Saturday to get his schedule for the next week, even if he doesn't work on Saturdays. And he just assumed that if he didn't go in to pick up his schedule, then that would mean he didn't have to work for the next week. So when the next week came by and he didn't show up for his shift, his manager called to tell him that he was supposed to be at work. He told his manager that he was not supposed to work since he didn't pick up his schedule. The manager got pissed and told him he had to call the girl who was on call for that day or else he would be in trouble. So he called the on-call girl and yelled at her for not showing up to cover his shift since he was not supposed to work. The next week he was only scheduled for on-call shifts, and he assumed on-call means that he needed to call the store whenever he wanted to work and the store would give him shift. So when the manager called him into work, he got pissed because he didn't call them to tell them he was available. Then I broke up with him, so I didn't know what happened after. I'm not a boss, but I got a couple of good ones. In my teens I spent a summer with my uncle in New York City. I got a job in a restaurant my uncle did it, and accounting software for. My uncle lived in the same building where the restaurant was and was friends with the owner, who was the landlord as well. It was a small place, with a sports theme and maybe 3 or 4 waiters and staff. One of the waiters, whom we'll call Steve, was one of those guys who have been waiters forever. He was competent, punctual, and honest. Or so it seems. One of my tasks was to open the restaurant in the morning for the incoming employees. One morning I got to the restaurant and found the back door open and the lights on. I got scared shitless and ran back to ask my uncle to help me figure out if anything was wrong. We walked in carefully and noticed Steve's coat and bag on a stool. So we started calling for Steve. We heard some noises coming from the employee restroom that we had passed and started knocking, but all we heard were muffled sounds from the inside of the bathroom. We tried opening the door but something was blocking it. Eventually we managed to force our way into the bathroom, where we found Steve sitting on the toilet with his pants down and shooting something with a syringe into his business. My uncle told me to get out and call the owner. The owner eventually arrived and a semi-conscious Steve admitted to a heroin habit. He was fired on the spot. The owner figured out later that Steve had stolen a set of keys and had been doing this, among other things, like stealing, etc. He liked the guy though, so he never pressed any charges. In my current job we had to deal with 3 different guys. Bob was argumentative, lazy, and bonkers. He had several weird habits, like surfing the web all day long for wedding stuff, tuxedos, catering, bridal dresses, etc., or ninja stuff, gear, suits, videos, etc. Whenever he was asked to do anything he would argue the need to do it until people would get tired and get someone else to do it. One day he showed up with the rearview mirror of a car and proceeded to put atop his rather large court monitor so he could make sure he would not get caught surfing the web. When he figured out our boss was onto him, he quit in a huff. Current job, guy 2. Ron was a mild-mannered southern gentleman who did not do shit at work. While everybody was busy getting stuff done, he would fuck around with very minor tasks until deadlines approached. Then people would either offer to finish them for him or would reassign the tasks. This guy printed every single email he came across, no matter how minor or unrelated to projects, and put them in binders. His demise came when our boss asked him to complete a task. He got all pissed off, very of character for him, and told my boss that he was protected by one of the principals in our company and therefore untouchable. My boss told the principal, and the next morning, Ron was shown into the conference room upon arrival. He was let go and made to sign a letter about the cause for his dismissal. Current job, guy 3. Chuck was severely overweight and had an interesting personality. He never wore socks and had, I'm guessing, terrible hygiene. He would always cut into conversations that had nothing to do with him. He was nosy and opinionated and had some really awkward moments with clients. Without getting into details of what I do for a living, Chuck went on a business trip with our boss. He did not have a credit card to charge the expenses to, which is not necessarily weird. He did however charge a couple of expensive bottles of wine to his room account. My boss had used his card to pay for the room, so he noticed the charge immediately. Additionally, he asked a federal employee if he could buy a very uncommon hat that was part of said federal employee's uniform. He was very insistent despite being repeatedly rebuffed, all in front of our boss. Needless to say, he was let go the next week. Edit, for clarity and some typos. I once had an employee that complained all the time. And when I say all the time, I don't mean a lot. I actually mean all the time. Every word coming out of her mouth was a whinny complaint, and she talked all the time. She could ask questions, but only in the form of a complaint. This is an example on how she would ask for the login password. How the fuck am I supposed to log in on this old and dirty computer? I bet other people eat at their workstations. This creates germs. Everyone will get sick, especially young people. Young people get sick all the time. She complained about everything and anything. Here are some of her common complaints: her work, her coworkers, computers in general, me as her manager, that she had to work at all, the rest of the management, that she had to learn new things, that people complained about her complaining, that furniture was the wrong color / shape / size, that the monitor / chair / binder / mouse / keyboard was in the wrong place. She thought people moved stuff to annoy her, that her co-workers switched shifts to not work with her. I wonder why. That her own lunchbox contained food that weren't tasty enough, that other people ate food that weren't tasty / good for them / ugly / smelled bad, that other people were ugly / dumb / whinny, that we didn't work in the same way that we did 20 years ago. This list goes on forever. She also believed in all of the magazines targeted to older women. So she believed in homeopathy, astrology, all the different diet types. She was round like a ball and ate cookies all the time and stuff like that. She often complained about no one believing in her and that her knowledge was right and that everyone else was wrong. And because of my country's employment laws, we weren't allowed to fire people that actually work. Or rather, we can do that, but then we must pay several months' wages in settlement, except for the newest recruits. But she had worked in this company the longest, and we didn't want to do that. But one day did we have enough, we were just about to fire her anyway, and pay the fines, when she actually quit. She had got a job on our rival company. She thought that her problems actually was based on that our company was the worst ever, and our rival company actually bragged about hiring her. We laughed. It actually took 1 year before our rival company admitted that they had made the worst choice ever, and now she have worked there for so long that she is protected again by the employment laws. Does she like her new job? No, she thinks it's worse. She actually tried to get her old job back, but no. PTLDR, if you think that everyone else is wrong all the time, then maybe you are the one being wrong. The guy who was a good employee, always on time, hard worker, great team player, and smelled like a fatched from hell. I mean, this guy reeked so bad that his coat would smell up the locker room. It was totally a matter of personal hygiene. You would think that someone who had managed to get that far in life would have had their stench pointed out to them at some point. He passed a job interview, so he must have known the importance of taking a shower. I don't know, but when you have people coming to you and complaining, you have to do something. But how do you tell someone they stink? To spare his feelings, we tried the subtle approach like having team meeting about the importance of personal hygiene. Oh, did I mention this was a hospital? No effect. Then, in a burst of creativity, I asked one of the ladies to put together a gift basket with nice soap, shampoo and other personal hygiene products. She even put in a nice basket with ribbons to make it gifty and left it in front of his locker. I guess he re-gifted it because he did not take the not so subtle hint. Sadly, we had to make it a disciplinary issue. I tried to foist it off on ours, but policy said that he had to go through the verbal/written/probation process. Faking lawyers. You want uncomfortable? Try having that kind of sensitive discussion with someone while you want to throw up. I tried my best to keep it non-personal. We want the patients to feel comfortable. Health issues, which were very real. Yada yada yada. The guy acted totally offended. I could see him getting angry, like he was totally unwilling to accept that this was an issue. He said that he was a good worker, always willing to go the extra mile etc. point, and felt that I was just trying to railroad him out of there for some reason. After that, he turned into one of those come in, do the minimum amount needed to collect his check, have nothing but business interactions with the other employees and leave. After he put in exactly 8 hours, it was not long after that he left without even giving 2 weeks notice. This was at college job. I was a student manager, and I managed fellow students to run the building. Our job involves lifting and setting up tables and chairs for the various rooms as well as basic cleaning tasks. We have a dress code of a provided shirt and jeans, manager's khaki slacks. Unlike many student jobs, this one needed effort and a dedication to be done right, and it affected other students' events if you weren't. For a month I had warned a particular student that coming in late at 4 minutes after, like clockwork, was still late. The response was always, not according to the time clock. We have sheet to do, get here on time please. So one day they get there at 6 after, and I write them up. Not only that, they also decided that today they didn't need to follow the dress code either. So I wrote them up for that too. Sweatpants are a no-no specifically mentioned in the manual. Well, this person decided the best way to respond was to yell, I mean full lung for a half an hour, that they were not late, and that they were not sweatpants, because they did not scrunch at the bottom. I kid you not. Because magically the fabric is transformed into denim when the ankle is not constricted. What the fuck? I remember one time that he asked me to get a rake and rake the fake grass on the indoor soccer field. It was the stupidest thing ever. Well, it ends up that he was skimming money from admissions to sports events at the facility. He was also running a lawn care business using employees who were on the clock at the fitness center and pocketing the profits. He never asked me to participate. I imagine that's because he knew I'd rat him out without a second thought. He ended up in jail for a couple years and had to empty his retirement to pay back over $100,000 in stolen funds. The kicker is that the job paid something like $50,000 a year, and he didn't even have a college degree. He basically begged the mayor of the city for the job, and when he got it, he complained that the $40,000 salary wasn't comparable to other fitness center managers, and got it raised. That was one case where the universe truly restored balance. I hated that guy. Hiring potheads to do landscaping. My dad and I worked out of a white van doing contracting and cheat. Sometimes we needed help. 2 dudes stand out in particular. They're the stereotypical Canadianized brown dudes from India or Pakistan or something. Immigrant parents, young and dumb, getting high and drinking, etc. Anyway, so 2 guys show up in a car. One is pretty out of shape, the other is a twig. They are high as fuck, Tim's in hand. Oh, and it was 7:14 AM. They were supposed to start at 7. The job was to re-level a bunch of patio slabs similar to these. I told them to pull out the slabs using a pickaxe and a crowbar. Then they were to scrape them off with a scraper and stack them up side by side. Simple enough, right? I thought that they'd be able to handle that on their own. Holy fuck, was I wrong? Did I mention that there were about 15 bags of limestone on site? It's important to the story. So I run off to another job site nearby and get to work. Around 9 AM I decide to head back and check on the guys. Now enjoy while your imagination runs wild trying to figure out how bad they faked up. With all these hilarious stories, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue. I'd hate to waste my time typing this out if no one is reading it, so please let me know if you're interested in the rest of the story. It's 4 AM and I have nothing better to do. It's not biggie. Alright, so this is my father's story. First things first, a bit of backstory, haha. So over the summer, I always work with my dad. He's a carpenter. He used to find his own jobs, work for himself, and have his buddy work with him. Then his buddy got injured, not work related, and my dad got tired of the shit. Took a break for a while, then started working for one of his friends who ran his own small business. The friend lets my father hire anyone he can recommend, and they work under him. He doesn't need a whole lot of help though, so he only hires one guy, a neighbor. We'll call him Ricky. So Ricky used to be an alcoholic. He doesn't have a car anymore after he was drinking and driving, and his vehicle flipped over multiple times. After a while he got better, but I've always had suspicions that he was doing some heavy drugs. When I was younger I remember seeing something similar to an fourth connected to him, and I think going into his nose, but nothing else. Never thought much of it. I also saw what I would soon realize later in life, is that he had track marks. He did heroin. Then from what I've heard by my cousin, back when he would hang out at the park, Ricky would go around asking if anyone knew anyone that was dealing cocaine or anything. Ricky wanted his fix. Ricky isn't a cop. Ricky is a junkie. Fuck you Ricky. Okay, I'm getting a bit off track. So anyways, Ricky acts completely normal around everyone else, and all this other stuff raised to the surface after this big series of events which resulted in, well, I'll get to that later. So my dad hires Ricky.